Dungeon Hunter. Chapters 161 to 180. Chapter 161 to 163. Demon World Auction. It started at 5 million. Demons who accumulated a small number of points in the individual auctions wouldn't be able to participate. I earned a lot of points. It was one case, but it wasn't impossible to drive up points through the individual auctions. In fact, there were some unremarkable items that were sold for a high price. Upa. Apart from me, I guessed that Upa was the one with the most points among the demons. The majority of the demons in Upa's faction raised the price and bought his items for a high amount. It would have been an unfavorable fight if I didn't have the achievements store. I had the most disadvantageous position in the individual auction. I was alone and they had many people. Didn't the dark spirits anticipate this? It would be a heavy burden to sell individually. It was expected. The ones with a low amount of money were forgotten. They just had to sit on their hands. When a big item like the Hydra showed up at the auction, there was a concern over whether it would be purchased for a low amount of points. The price of a high-class creature had to always be high. The price needed to be adjusted. However, it was doubtful whether the system would stay still. The neutral system always sought equality. There was no way it would let the balance fall. The starting bid takes this into consideration. The dark spirits and Adonis were certainly aware of it. I looked around. It wouldn't be easy to come forward. Participating would prove that they had that much points. Ariel, Diablo and I were the only ones revealed. However, I used a significant amount at the individual auction so they didn't think I could participate. 5 million. It had been silent for many seconds. While everyone was worrying, someone opened their mouth. Grand Duke Upa Nim, I commend your great taste. 5 million points have come out. Upa was the first player. The number of points he had could be speculated. He was followed by Ariel. 6 million. Grand Duke Ariel Nim, you are as determined as you are beautiful. 7 million. Oh, Upa Nim, you rarely participated in the individual auctions but now you are going full steam ahead. 7 million points have come out. Upa seemed to have decided to buy the Hydra. The auction had just started so there were likely to be more good creatures and items. Yet Upa seemed highly focused on purchasing the Hydra. Perhaps he tentatively determined that the Hydra was worth more. Upa's judgment was somewhat valid. It was hard to imagine something comparable to the Hydra emerging in this auction. Pandemonium? It was a competition between Upa and Ariel. That alone was enough for Pandemonium to make a move. Yet all Pandemonium did was close his eyes. Was he waiting to see if something similar to the Hydra emerged in the second half? 8 million. Ariel Nim, will you get it this time? It might not stop here. 9 million. A destructive power comparable to a meteor. He has enormous financial reserves. Grand Duke Upa has bid 9 million points. It was on the verge of reaching 10 million. Ariel sighed. Her expression showed she didn't like it very much. The Hydra was being snatched away by Upa. The relationship between Upa and Ariel wasn't very good. It was a relationship where they couldn't defeat each other. The one who purchased the Hydra would have their strength rise vertically. And Upa was likely to aim for Ariel. Ariel didn't want that to happen. Dubalong opened his mouth in this tense atmosphere. 9 million. Is there anyone else? That is still low when considering the value of the Hydra. Pandemonium didn't intend to participate at all. The points were centered around the Grand Dukes, so if Pandemonium abstained, it was likely that the Hydra auction would be finished. Dubalong wasn't very satisfied but he shook his head and said, "Then I will count from 5. 10 million. I leisurely interrupted Dubalong. It wasn't a large or small voice. However, there was a heavy weight to my words. That alone was enough to make Dubalong jump. Grand Duke, Randolph Nim. 10 million points have come out. HMPH. Ariel cleared her throat. She had a strange smile like she was delighted. If I participated then it was highly likely that I would obtain the item. Besides, Ariel preferred that I obtain the Hydra instead of Upa. Upa frowned as he glanced at me. I had spent 30 million points, yet I was once again involving myself in the auction. 11 million. Grand Duke Upa Nim, should I stay out of it? How exciting. 12 million. I can't see the end of this. It is like a spring that won't dry. Grand Duke Randolph Nim. Upa gazed at the boys and girls on the ceiling. But they weren't laughing. Tisk. Upa clicked his tongue. In contrast to Upa's expression, Ariel's smile widened. He has quite a lot. It was clear that Upa had driven all the points of his faction towards himself. I had a lot more points available, so Upa needed to think about it. I wasn't present last year, but he learnt after his experience in the first 3 years. I was on a different level from the other demons. Is there anyone else? 12 million points has been called. Then, I will count from 5. Dubalong didn't like it, but Upa couldn't bid anymore. I knew Upa's character to some extent. Upa had stopped running. I was certain of it. However, the nature of the auction meant that time needed to be given. 3, 2, 1. Congratulations. The Hydra now belongs to Grand Duke Randolph Nim. I had succeeded in getting a big one. Many auction items appeared afterwards. I was amazed at how the quality of the goods improved in just 2 years. However, none of the items captured my heart. I focused more on observing what the demons purchased. Whether they focused on items, creatures or skills, I could infer some of their situation by looking at the items they bought. Chrisley also read every aspect of the demons. In the meantime, 10 items passed and the sale of the 11th auction item finally started. Let me explain before showing the next item. We have spent decades following the traces of the true demonic dragon Aogen. 1 year, we found Krasla and Chrisley. Then this year, we were able to obtain something else related to Aogen. Chrisley's eyes widened. The true demonic dragon Aogen. The dragon of dragons. He was one of the parents who gave birth to Chrisley. Aogen could be obtained from the achievements store. I was able to summon him with 50,000 achievement points. It was natural to be curious about something related to him. It was also true for the other demons. There was no demon who didn't know Aogen's name. All eyes stared at Dubalong as he spoke. The high dark elf Sheila, who was mated to the true demonic dragon Aogen. Her body is cursed. What? I was forced to be silent. I knew the dark spirits were chasing Aogen's traces, but I never expected them to obtain Sheila's body. It didn't happen in my previous life. A high dark elf. She was a high-class 3LV creature and the real leader of the Dark Elves. Only a few showed up each a century, and Sheila was the one who led Julium and Chrisley's village. Chrisley only told me that Sheila had died when she was a child, but she didn't know the details. Chrisley was almost ignorant about Sheila. There is something strange. World trees existed in the demon world. Strong dark elves could live near them. Sheila was qualified, but she took care of Chrisley's village. But she disappeared after Chrisley's birth. Julium and the others believed that Sheila was dead. Yet, her body now appeared at the auction. Pure white hair. There was a crescent moon mark engraved on her forehead. A beautiful dark elf female was trapped in the ice. In addition, strange magic power was flowing from her. That is a curse. The ice itself contained a powerful magic power. A strange magic power that even caused me to frown. It was sealing Sheila's body. It is clear that this isn't an ordinary curse. It has the power of ice that is opposite to Aogen, but the power is comparable. We've been investigating this curse but haven't found anything so far. It is really strange. An unknown strength. Dubalong was excited. Aogen was a true demonic dragon. Different from a normal dragon. A creature that had supposedly jumped into the realm of transcendence. Incredibly, the magic power had a similar strength. It was binding the high dark elf Sheila. It is strange for that type of strength to be unknown. I touched my jaw. If this was true, then the Grand Dukes wouldn't be able to easily deal with the mystery. In the demon world, Aogen was treated as an insurmountable wall that couldn't even be touched. It might be possible to defeat him if all the Grand Dukes led their troops, but the damage would be beyond imagination. It hurt their pride, so they never mentioned Aogen at all. There was a non-aggression agreement with the Grand Dukes every time Aogen became involved. Then, this had a similar power. An unknown creature. The high dark elf Sheila fought against this curse and died in the process. How can you use the body? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a high dark elf. It is almost impossible to see the corpse of a high dark elf because they are normally buried at the world tree. But, it is now right in front of you. What type of power would an undead made from the body of a high dark elf have? The power of this curse will make a more powerful undead. It made a lot of sense. The power of this curse was extraordinary. Originally undead had yin attributes, so strong curses would make stronger undead. A high dark elf had endless possibilities when turning it into an undead. Usually high dark elves live near the world tree, and would become its food after dying. It was impossible to obtain their corpse. Maybe the strongest undead might emerge. Depending on the skill of the creator, a great creature could be formed. I turned my eyes towards Chrisley. Is this really Sheila? Was my question. Chrisley nodded with a complicated expression. I have to buy her. It wasn't simply because of Chrisley. I was curious about the power of the curse. I was curious to know what type of existence could curse Sheila and have comparable strength to Aogen. Who was it? Such power hadn't revealed itself in the demon world. There were no indications at all. The curse was very powerful. Ho! Someone made a sound of admiration. Pandemonium. He was familiar with magic and was also involved in the manufacturing of undead. The best material was currently in front of his eyes. Upa was also interested. I need to confirm it clearly. I opened mind's eye. I used my eyes and tried to identify Sheila. Name. Sheila. Uniqueness. She is dead. She has an unknown, cursed status. An unknown strength is accumulating inside her heart. No titles or stats could be seen. This was because she was dead. A status window would be useless unless she was revived as an undead. However, there was a hidden option. An unknown strength inside her heart. I couldn't feel or see it with the naked eye. The dark spirits weren't aware of my transcendental state, so they likely couldn't notice it either. At any rate, the strength inside the heart was the only clue. I wondered what that power was and what changes would occur if I unlocked it. Starting at 5 million points. Dubalong said with a laugh. The starting bid was similar to that of the Hydra. It was expensive but worth it when looking at the high dark elf Sheila. 5 million. Grand Duke Pandemonium Nim. As expected, you can appreciate its worth. 6 million. Grand Duke Upa Nim. I hope you win this time. Ariel didn't participate. She had no interest in making undead. It was the body of a high dark elf, but it seemed like she showed no desire to participate in the auction of this item. Upa and Pandemonium growled as they looked at each other. Both of them specialized in the undead. It was obvious that there would be competition over such a material. 7 million. He is finally pushing out his points. Grand Duke Pandemonium has called 7 million. I didn't know about Pandemonium. Upa had a little bit more than 10 million points. His points were revealed thanks to the Hydra. Even so, he was confident enough to pick the fight. When the Grand Dukes fought over an important item, the winner would be delighted while the loser would be red-faced. Points were a type of power, so it showed that they were lacking. Upa and his faction mainly participated in the auction when it came to strong creatures. It was evidence that he was elevating his strength. Sheila's corpse was perfect for that purpose. Pandemonium didn't pay attention to that fact. His face showed his confidence in winning. 8 million. 9 million. Upa called 8 million and Pandemonium raised the bid before Dubalong could even talk. Upa frowned fiercely. A close match. My body is trembling. This is possible due to the value of a high dark elf corpse. From the perspective of the host, I am grateful that something so good is being treated well. Grand Duke Pandemonium has bid 9 million points. Any more bids? Dubalong was trying to maintain the atmosphere. I stopped for a moment to ponder. Indeed, Sheila's body was worth more than the Hydra. In fact, the skill of the creator was very important when it came to the undead. It wasn't guaranteed to get a decent piece of work based on the materials. In relation to the creation of undead, it was true that Upa was ahead of Pandemonium. If it was made by Upa, then a high-class 3LV creature might be born. Pandemonium's mouth curled upwards. It was the expression of a winner. He was convinced he had won. He was caught off guard at this moment. I opened my mouth. 10 million. I couldn't fall down in this fight. I finally bought Sheila's body for 12 million points. The problem was whether Chrisley was willing to revive Sheila as an undead. Of all my subordinates, Chrisley was the one most familiar with making undead. She would do what the dungeon master told her to. However, it was unclear if the work would be carried out with sincerity. The mother who gave birth to her. Although Chrisley had no memories of her mother, she was likely to feel complex emotions. It was called revival, but an undead was no different to making a doll that could be commanded. Depending on the degree of damage to the body, memories might be lost. Or there could be a different personality and she might not even remember she was Sheila. She still has to do it. Chrisley's expression was dark. She was sitting patiently in her spot. Perhaps, as a clever woman, she already noticed what I wanted. Now I will introduce the next item that I am proud of. It is Purigamo's flute. I turned my attention back to the front. Anyway, I wouldn't receive all the items until after the auction was over. It was time to concentrate on the auction. I bought the Conqueror's Ring, Mindset of a Puppeteer, Gajunuk's Echo, and Esalal's Blade. It was the middle of the auction and I had already bought 6 things. I had approximately 25 million points remaining. There was still room to spare. The points used had already exceeded 100 million, so other demons had used a lot of their points. This might not be over. I continued to watch the auction. It wouldn't be bad if I settled on these 6 items. I could invest the remaining points in my dungeon and the leftovers would be used in next year's auction. However, my expectations would stay until the end. The dark spirits had driven up the points in the individual auctions. Many of the auction items were large, so I was expecting special measures to be used. If so, it might not end with the Hydra and Sheila's body. I was sure there was something else prepared. I watched carefully as the auction progressed. Finally, an item that met my expectations appeared as the 54th item. Please pay attention. I am sure that all of you will be surprised by the following item. Right, an angel egg. It isn't an ordinary egg, but one that has been designated at the level of an archangel. Maybe even more. Well, the explanation ends here. You will have to judge it for yourself. An angel egg appeared as Dubalong's words ended. It was similar to the appearance I knew, but it had a stronger holy power. The one that will emerge won't be weak. I smirked. It was an angel egg. The level was higher than what I had seen before. I didn't know where it came from, but it was likely that the dark spirits stole it. I was able to purchase normal eggs from the achievements store, but this angel egg was more peculiar and had excellent holy power. I stared at it. The angel egg had never appeared at the auctions in my previous life. At that time, the dark spirits had steadily increased their strength and had no need for adventures. The fact that an angel egg emerged showed their urgency. Aren't you curious? Don't you have the urge to challenge it? Originally, angel eggs are kept deep inside heaven, a place where only a few selected angels can enter. For many of the guests here, it will be your first time seeing an angel egg. Angels and demons had an antagonistic relationship. It was natural to have never seen an egg before. It was just an endless repetition of killing. Yet, an angel egg emerged. It was also an egg with a very strong holy power. If they could breed an angel above the level of an archangel, the demons hadn't imagined it before. That imagination could now be turned into reality. In addition, it was ideal for getting rid of other angels that were the demons' natural enemies. Dubalong stimulated their desire to buy it. It is a very special item, but I will start at a low price. Any guests can participate, for only 100,000 points. Their desire started brimming over. An angel egg came out and stimulated the buyers, so the atmosphere became very heated after that. There were good quality items or mysterious ones that stimulated the curiosity of the demons. I ended up taking 10 items, including the angel egg. When including the Great Fire Essence, Hyacinth's Bow and other small items from the individual auctions, I ended up with 15 goods. So, the auction ended. Chrisley, let's go back. The auction was over and there was nothing more to see here. I needed to go back and organize my purchases. As expected, the harvest would raise my power. I hadn't expected much. I was already in the realm of transcendence. I had concluded that I wouldn't raise my overall power that much in the Demon World auction. But the other elemental spirits appeared, so the dark spirits put in a greater effort. It wasn't urgent, but, thanks to that, the range of what I could do had increased. Yes, Chrisley responded calmly from behind me. As I left the auction house, Ariel Diablo blocked my path. What do you want? I asked. Ariel smirked and responded. Randolph Brigzeal, I will start moving. Moving? Did that mean she had been still until now? I didn't know why she was telling me this, but Ariel said one final thing. Amuse me to the end, you have entered the realm of transcendence. They were crucial words. Indeed, she had noticed. Right, Ariel Diablo's eyes seemed to be the best. I hadn't revealed my transcendence, but Ariel had spoken in a confident tone. Her words about moving could be interpreted in many ways. Furthermore, Ariel had been unchallenged so far. If she moved, I didn't know what direction this war would go in. Upa's power had been cut, Pandemonium absorbed Okuyo's faction, but Ariel had been untouched so far. Despite Pandemonium absorbing Okuyo's remaining forces, he wasn't comparable to Ariel, who had been accumulating her strength. I have to prepare properly. I couldn't overlook her. Ariel moving in earnest. I needed to prepare countermeasures. There would only be one winner in the end. Everyone around me were enemies. This rule was absolute. I couldn't be too relaxed. Despite entering the realm of transcendence, war isn't fought alone. The path forward seemed vaguely blurred. My dungeon master, are you sure we should go back right away? Is there anything left to do? Chrisley shook her head. I noticed that the auctioneer wanted to have a separate meeting. Dubalong speaks too much. That guy doesn't need to concern you. I noticed his sly glances after the auction ended. He wanted to meet with me separately, but it didn't seem to be about anything good. It was better to just ignore him. He would either ask about the days I disappeared, or my relationship with the fire and water spirits. I quickly left, with Chrisley following behind me quietly. I went through the crack and returned to my dungeon. The familiar top floor could be seen. Luxurious desks and chairs were set up with sweetened honey water and cookies. Master, you've come back. For some reason, Yi welcomed me with a mild-mannered appearance. She was wearing a maid's outfit that didn't really suit her. Are you tired? Please sit down. Yi has prepared honey water and sweets. This is different. I didn't know where this came from. Yi had never been like this. Yi clenched her fists. Yi is no longer the Yi of the past. Yi will do her best to be Master's faithful fairy in the future. I didn't know how long it would last, but it wasn't a bad phenomenon. I couldn't hate someone who was working hard. I sat down and enjoyed the honey water. Chrisley naturally sat opposite me. Master, what did you buy this time? Yi wants to look at it. Something like the king bee wouldn't be too bad. That reminded me, I hadn't seen the king bees following behind Yi for a while. Dead. It seemed like some had died during the attack while I was away. I hadn't thought about it at all. The king bees hadn't come out. Yi flew around me with the honey water and cookies. She didn't spare any effort and directly fed them into my mouth. Her face was filled with expectations. It seemed like she believed I had bought a king bee. Crying. After a while, a crack appeared in the surrounding space. The auction goods had started to arrive. Yi, I wonder what will come out. Yi flew to the crack and muttered. Yi used to act like this at the end of every auction. It had been a long time since I'd seen this scene. I stood up with my hands clasped behind my back. Chrisley stood close by like she was going to protect me. Soon the first auction item appeared. Eobobo, a massive, mountain-like creature. Hydra. It emerged first from the crack and almost reached the ceiling. Yi freaked out and retreated. Her body trembled with fear. The 18 eyes looked at Yi. Why Yi isn't tasty? Yi quickly retreated behind me. She peeked over my shoulder. Gurung. Kua. The 9 heads. Its condition wasn't normal, but it didn't attack. It wasn't perfect, but the contract was invoked. I am your master. I walked up to it and lightly raised my hand. At the same time, I opened my magic power to make sure it knew I was its owner. Waruruk. There was a spark of arrogance after I opened my magic power. The Hydra stepped forward, causing a huge impact. But I didn't move. It stared straight into my eyes and seemed like it would step on me. Master. Dungeon Master. Yi and Chrisley cried out, but I just raised my hand. This was a fight between the Hydra and I. A third-party intervention wasn't good. Soon a massive foot moved and came down towards my head. I just stared into its eyes. I was prepared for the damage from the blow. It was an urgent situation. Chrisley couldn't bear it anymore and pulled out her wand. However, the Hydra's foot stopped moving. Grr! The Hydra snorted and took one step back. It was restless and bewildered. But everything was decided with this one act. You will be a great sword to kill my enemies. I said with a smile. No matter how great the Hydra was, I was the master and it was under my control. Next, I decided to appoint the dungeon masters. I obtained this privilege after becoming a Grand Duke. In the meantime, the other dungeons hadn't been operating that efficiently. There was only one of me, so I couldn't see the situation of the dungeons in real time. But now it was different. Those appointed as dungeon masters would have the proper permissions to make changes. A fairy alone had limitations, so it was better to take care of it quickly. Chrisley, take this. This is an item purchased at the auction? Mindset of a puppeteer. It was a skill book suitable for Chrisley to create and manipulate the undead. I will leave the dungeon in China to you. This item is a gift from me. Now you will fulfill the duties of a dungeon master. A dungeon master? Chrisley opened her eyes wide with disbelief. You are qualified enough. The method of appointing a dungeon master was simple. I had to acknowledge them and give them something as a token. The effect was activated after Chrisley received mindset of a puppeteer. The dark elf, Chrisley, has been appointed as the dungeon master. Her loyalty is very high. Status: blind devotion. Under the patronage of Grand Duke Randolph Brigzeal, she will destroy his enemies from the forefront. She was under my control so I could see her status. But I didn't only have the China dungeon. There was also the one in Japan. Tashmal, are you leaving the dungeon to me? She asked as her 6 black wings flapped. You will take Japan's dungeon. Raise the angels and forces there. It is a great place to build up power. Tashmal was calm as she received Gajunuk's echo. Depending on the magic power, it was a harp that could give off a strong melody. In particular, the effects of angels and saints would rise significantly. Despite her corruption, Tashmal would be able to use it effectively. I won't refuse. Tashmal coolly accepted Gajunuk's echo. The fallen angel, Tashmal, has been appointed as the dungeon master. Her loyalty isn't bad. Status: you are an enemy of her enemy. Good feelings. She won't hesitate to exert herself for the Grand Duke Randolph Brigzeal. Chapter 164 to 165. Ifrit. I had 3 dungeons, including the one in Korea. I filled the 2 empty vacancies. Chrisley and Tashmal's abilities meant they would be good dungeon masters. And I had one more thing to say to Tashmal. Do you recognize this? I presented something I bought from the auction to Tashmal. Tashmal's eyes widened as she saw it. An angel egg? It is already blessed in the egg stage. Oh my god, where did you obtain this? The Demon World Auction. You can also go there next year. The dark spirits have touched the heavenly soul. Tashmal's body trembled. Although I could purchase the angel egg from the achievements store, the dark spirits had to steal it. I promised her that I would save the humans from the demons. In fact, that was a promise I made to the gods when they returned me to the past. I didn't care what the conditions were, as long as I had the chance to return. It was a miracle. Still, I wasn't the type of person who would turn my back on a promise. So I gave the humans some opportunities. Anyway, Tashmal willingly joined me, but the dark spirits were different. Tashmal knew a little bit about the Demon World Auction. She understood that the dark spirits sold items and creatures for their own benefit. It was the same for the angel egg they sold. Her anger was natural. Don't worry, this was the only one. Tashmal's anger calmed down a little bit. This egg, it is a special egg that has the blessing of the celestial ruler. I know that the celestial ruler blesses the eggs that are designated as advanced angels. She explained the item. Tashmal, who was a Dominion's angel, had only been intermediate rank. What capabilities would the advanced angels have? Tashmal, you will raise it. It is nonsense. It is a sacred egg that I have to return to the angels right now. Tashmal hastily refused. It was an honor just seeing an advanced angel. She was anxious just holding the egg. But I laughed. To who? Aren't the angels now on earth? Do you think they will take the egg from our hands? They can't return to heaven. They are always being attacked by demons, so it won't be safe. I knew a little bit about an angel's physiology. Angels wouldn't accept an egg that had been touched by a demon and a fallen angel. It was the same even for a blessed egg. The situation also wasn't good for them. Tashmal was silent. I had struck a sore spot. The only safe place to raise it is Japan's dungeon. Do you understand? If not, this egg will just be neglected. I understand, but don't expect much. I don't know if I can raise an angel whose status is above mine. Tashmal said with a bittersweet expression and turned around. If she couldn't do it, then nobody could. Most of my knowledge about angels came from her. Although she had fallen, her essence was still an angel. I have roughly 12 million points remaining. The appointment ceremony ended. It didn't matter if they acted separately. The important thing was their performance. I will wear this ring. It was the Conqueror's ring that I purchased from the auction. I looked at the explanation using mind's eye. Name: Conqueror's ring. Epic set. Description: a ring that only a conqueror can wear. It is a paired set, and if the other ring is worn, a great power can be exerted. Asterisk the dignified effect will be proportional to the wearer's magic power. Significantly increases the recovery of magic power, plus 10% per conquered territory. Asterisk it is only effective for those who own a territory. Asterisk the skill, Final Impact, X Epic, is available when worn with the Contempt of the Weak ring. There were no options that raised my stats. However, I noticed the set effect as well as the recovery of magic power. There were many items that healed a wound or restored stamina, but those that recovered magic power were rare. It was a growth-type item. The recovery rate was ambiguous because there were no precise standards, but I could roughly guess. In my case, it would take 5 days to recover if all of my magic power was consumed. The underground world and my dungeons increased the effect by 40%, meaning the recovery would be reduced to 3 days. There is no way to obtain the Contempt of the Weak ring yet. This was the first time I saw the ring. I had no idea where the Contempt of the Weak ring was. However, I was convinced that I could get it. Chrisley, I wonder how Roy is doing. Roy, the small dark elf, was left with the Awakened and the Giran as they attacked Pandemonium's dungeon. The raid should have taken place by now. I was curious. I will bring the crystal ball. Chrisley nodded and left. After a while, she brought a crystal ball that was the size of her body. I poured magic power into it and could see Roy's surroundings. Damn, one of the Awakened spat with disgust. He looked terrible. He gritted his teeth and forced his tired legs to move. We were nearly there. The dungeon core was right in front of us. I didn't think there would be reinforcements. The dungeon capture was a failure. They were forced to retreat just before capturing it. If it wasn't for the Giran's barrier, they would have been wiped out. This will do for now. Serious damage was dealt to them. If we go home and rebuild our strength, there is some hope of eliminating them. The Giran in the form of a female spoke from the front. Although it was a failure, it was still a valuable experience. The suppressed Awakened had managed a counterattack. This experience would help them grow quickly. That's right. Next to her, Roy gave a small nod. Roy also fought on the front lines. There were injuries on his body, but he had a pretty reliable face. The words from both of them reversed the atmosphere. Yes, Savior Nim's child agreed. We need to raise our strength. Please help us. Please. The eyes of the Awakened lit up. They had been on the verge of capturing the dungeon core. It was a remarkable achievement for the Awakened. An unprecedented event. Their confidence climbed. In the midst of the turmoil, the Giran spoke to Roy. Child, their willpower alone won't be enough. If your master goes out it will be easy, but since he isn't here, you should go. Me? I subtly suggested it to them. My Giran skill will bring out the temperament of a king in some of them. However, a suddenly created tower can collapse. A means of control is needed. Can't Giran Nim do it? I am their guardian deity. My skills are based in belief. If I punish them, a king won't be born. Even if they were born, they would just be a tyrant. Roy hesitated before saying, I have to obtain master's consent. The Giran laughed. He will agree. I called Rose. Roy was alone in this situation. Rose would help him walk the path. Rose, go to Roy and hand him this sword. Isn't this a really cool looking sword? The Esalal blade. It is a sword that will prove Roy's worth. Rose's eyes shone. What about me, master? Roy was given a sword, so she wanted one as well. I will make you one. I was able to obtain a small amount of orichalcum. Ah, I saw that in a book. It is a great metal. You are making a sword for Rose with it? Wah. Rose expressed her pleasure. Orichalcum. It was one of the things I bought at the Demon World auction. Orichalcum was the strongest iron and was called God's metal. If it was refined and used to make a weapon, a masterpiece would be created. A skilled blacksmith was needed, but I had the Dwarf King and Oswin. The combination should be enough to make something of the metal. I will send you the sword when it is finished. For now, join Roy and give him this sword. You are telling Rose to help Roy? That's right. Well, Roy can be insecure when he is alone. Rose will keep an eye on him. Rose casually held the sword that was bigger than her body. She carried the sword and headed to M3. I will go straight away, Tilda. Rose sat on M3's shoulder and they started to move quickly. Then, the post-processing of the auction goods was almost over. The other items needed time, so I only had one thing left. The Great Fire Essence. The great fire essence had come to the dungeon in a cage. I climbed to the top floor and watched it for a while. Everybody else saw fire, but I could see a two-legged dragon. It looked like a dragon man. Fire lit up his spine and gave him a sharp impression. "What are you?" It was something I had been wondering. I had felt a strange pull to him since the first time I saw him. He felt familiar to me. Now it was time to check. I would resolve my curiosity before returning him to the fire spirits. Bump! I unlocked the iron cage. The door was opened. Grr! He rushed towards me. Chapter 165. Ifrit. A white space stretched out endlessly in front of me. I opened my eyes in the center. This place? I frowned. It was the first time I had seen a space like this, and I didn't remember moving here. I could only speculate that it happened after the fire essence tackled me. "Give me what is inside of you." Flames appeared in this white space. It was a familiar presence. Fire essence? The two-legged dragon. A human-like dragon. This world seemed to be his. "My name is Ifrit, one of the 9 fire essences. The half that Contigonam stole was transferred to you. If you don't give it back to me, I will destroy you." I had no idea what he was talking about. I guessed that something entered me when I killed Contigonam. "Ifrit, even if you are right, it became mine the moment it entered me. I would hand it over if there was a deal, however simple threats won't work. I have been trapped, but now it is different. This is my world, so you can never beat me. If you don't, I will possess your whole body." Guguging. The world shook and Ifrit's body changed. After a while, Ifrit became the size of a huge giant. There was enormous fire magic power. Ifrit was truly amazing. His magic power had to be over 100. But there were many ambiguous points. He said that he was only half. The other half had entered me. Nevertheless, he was still in the transcendental realm? Even a half-transcendental being would be too much for the dark spirits to handle. I couldn't understand how he didn't break the cage. At the auction, I had clearly seen Ifrit trying to break the bars to escape. The cage was made in the name of the devil, but it wouldn't be enough to keep a transcendental being in. "This is a dream." I laughed. Additionally, he was the one who gave me the big hint. This was his dream. Originally a work of fiction is called a dream. It was a world that covers the truth and only shows lies. Even the impossible could take place here. So, it was possible that Ifrit made himself appear transcendent in this landscape. I started to see cracks as soon as I realized the truth. I opened Mind's Eye. I would be able to reveal all of the truth if I used Mind's Eye. Name: Ifrit. Stats: Strength 90, Intelligence 88, Agility 87, Stamina 85, Magic Power 90, Potential 445 hundredths, Uniqueness. One of the 9 fire essences. Their role is to act as guardians for the fire spirits. Currently, he has lost half of his ability to dominate. Skill: Image Implementation, Epic, Power of Fire, Epic. I knew it. The stats that I saw with Mind's Eye were considerably less than mine. The feeling of oppression was due to his manipulation. "How about it? I will spare your life if you give it to me now." Ifrit thought I was wavering due to his words. A laugh emerged from my mouth. I never thought that the great fire essence would try to scam me. The fire spirits worshipped him, but he was nothing more than a scammer. "You talk too much," I said curtly. There was no need to start a conversation. It was something I developed over my long life as a demon. There was a winner and loser. The winner had the right to take everything. Words weren't needed. It was a sign of insecurity. Ifrit might be half complete, but he had failed to recognize my rank. He wanted to beat me with a bluff. The attempt was good, but I didn't bite that easily. "I will give you a chance. I hate using force when it isn't needed." Ifrit still hadn't stopped talking. There was a degree of bravado. So I opened up my magic power and concentrated it on my throat. "Reveal the true appearance, Ifrit." At that moment, Kururung, the world convulsed. This world had no power over me once I realized the truth. It was far too rough to catch me. "You unbelievable." Ifrit had returned to his original size. He stepped back with confusion. But I had no intention of leaving him alone. I gripped Wrath and the Emperor's sword. "This is a dream world, so you won't die." "No, can a fire like you even die in the first place?" It didn't matter. Whether he could die or not wouldn't change the fact that I would attack until he was destroyed. Ifrit shouted in surrender. Stop, I lost. I'll acknowledge it, but I still struck. I used my full force. This was a world of dreams, but a strike from a transcendent person would still deal a significant blow. From the beginning, this place was meaningless to me. Yet he still had that attitude. You've maintained your consciousness. I thought he needed more punishment. Please. Ifrit's flesh was stretched out like a rag. The dream world tried to restore Ifrit's broken body, but my damage surpassed the regenerative power. It couldn't keep up with the speed of destruction, and now Ifrit's body was strange. His hands were on his head while his face was at his feet. I gave a low laugh. I smirked and once again split apart his body. The flames around Ifrit's body were weakened. Stop, stop, ah! Screams echoed through the entire space. Ifrit lay on the ground in pain. I will destroy you. Once I die, the power inside you will run wild. Don't think that you will be safe. Stop talking. Every word from your mouth is a lie. And this is also a bluff. It was easy to distinguish the second lie. Even if Ifrit was correct, there was no reason why I couldn't control it. A little force would allow me to overcome it. Quajik. I stepped on his mouth. After one more hour of beatings, Ifrit's attitude changed. Spare me. I can't be destroyed yet. The reason? I haven't met my son in 20,000 years. Do I have to continue listening to a dog? I clicked my tongue. By default, Ifrit was fire. It was impossible for him to conceive. It seemed like I needed to hit him a few more times. Ifrit cried out desperately as my sword flashed. The ninth fire. The fire that symbolizes courage is derived from me. I haven't seen him in 20,000 years, so he must be heartbroken. So I should give you back unharmed? That's right. It was new information. I thought about it for a moment. The great fire essences held important meaning to the fire spirits. A total of 9 had been born since the creation of the fire spirit world. This meant he had access to the fire of courage. Needless to say, my influence was rising. Ifrit continued nervously. I can work directly with the fire spirit king. If I can communicate with the Fire Spirit King, he will reward you. The Fire Spirit King can't ignore it if both my son and I speak to him. I will give you back. I interrupted him. Ifrit was delighted. Really? However, I won't hand over what is inside me. There is also no way I will let you go so easily. Ifrit stiffened. He instinctively realized that my tone wasn't normal. I aimed my sword at him and declared, "Come inside me. I have no intention of eating you like Contigonam. You are a type of spirit, so a contract is available." I randomly stabbed a spot. I didn't hesitate to inflict damage. A contract. It wasn't comparable to a contract with an ordinary spirit. If I made a contract with the higher fire essence, the fire spirits wouldn't be able to deal with me. I would also be able to use his power. Anyway, half of him was inside me. Not only that, I was looking forward to meeting the fire in charge of courage. I will give you 2 choices. Destruction or a contract. Pick which path to walk on. It is unprecedented for a great fire to contract with someone. I acknowledge your strength, but this is completely different. Then you will be destroyed. I erased my smile and took an attacking stance. He had chosen his own death. It seemed like there was no other way. I would make an excuse to the fire spirits, maybe by blaming Pandemonium and Contigonam. Ifrit sensed my determination as I raised my hand. Wait, although there is no precedent, there is no rule against it. Contract, I will contract with you. However, this contract will be automatically destroyed if the fire spirits are harmed. I will only act if they point their swords at me first. I shrugged. I had to maintain the alliance with the fire spirits for a while. One of my goals was to incite them to move. They would pressure the dark spirits. I will give you the source of fire, so don't reject it. Waruruk. After his words ended, an intense fire soared from Ifrit. The fire swallowed me up. It isn't hot. It felt strange. It was more warm than hot. The great fire essence Ifrit wants to form a contract with the demon, Randolph Brigzeal. Do you accept? I nodded and a new window appeared. The contract has been completed. Impossible achievement. For the first time, a demon has formed a contract with a great fire essence. In the future, the fire spirits will give Randolph Brigzeal even more preferential treatment. 3 million PT will be paid. 2,000 achievement points will be added. It was better to form a contract than to use force. This seemed like the right path when looking at the future. I can't return to the spirit world, unlike normal spirits. I have no choice but to make a home in your body. Ifrit spoke in a gloomy tone. Where is your other half? The heart. It is hidden there. It was in the heart of the Hell Monarch. I wondered why I couldn't sense its presence. The contract is absolute. Ifrit won't be able to kill me. Furthermore, the heart of the Hell Monarch was powerful. If Ifrit tried something, then the heart wouldn't stay still. It would become a true prison for Ifrit. Others might feel a little panicked, but I was different. My body also contained Lightning God. There was no way I wouldn't know if Ifrit made any strange movements. Okay, go to the heart. Kururung. After that, the fake world started to crumble. When I returned to reality, I couldn't see the fire essence in front of me. Under the contract, he had already moved to my heart. At the same time, the two forces combined. Is this the power of domination? Ifrit, he was the fire essence responsible for domination. I could subtly feel the power inside me. The split power of Ifrit has been successfully combined. The power of Ifrit has been forcibly combined with the heart of the Hell Monarch. Ifrit's power of domination has settled in the user, Randolph Briggseel. What was this? Combined power? The contract could exert power on the target. Yet it had forced a combination and made an alternate form available to me. Ifrit is shackled by the heart of the Hell Monarch. I roughly understood. It was unexpected, but it wasn't a bad thing. Once I looked at my status window, a skill had been added. Name Power of Domination, X Epic, Passive. Description. You can dominate opponents that are in a critical state. The success will depend on the user's magic power and the opponent's intelligence. If the opponent is dominated, they will gradually lose their ego and follow you. Asterisk invalidates the territory declaration. Chapter 166 to 167, Fire Spirit King. A skill that overpowered the opponent and made them follow me. The power of domination was indeed amazing. It really was a skill for me. The utilization is high. It was a great ability, but there was a hidden option. Invalidating a territory proclamation. The meaning of this wasn't simple. It meant the domain of angels or dungeons of other demons wouldn't be able to affect me. Some nobles automatically had their own territory. Or it might be due to a skill. Being able to invalidate a territory was worthwhile. Talk. I gently patted my heart. Thanks to Lightning God, I could feel the trapped Ifrit. The heart of the Hell Monarch and the great fire essence. I was drawing closer to being able to challenge a god. The half-body of Ifrit couldn't be compared. Yihi. Yes, master. Yihi is here. Tilda. Yihi flapped her wings and flew over. She had been waiting nearby for my call. Joy was overflowing from her huge eyes. Ever since I returned to the dungeon, Yihi hadn't wanted to leave my side. Call Maxim and Oswin. Yihi. Yes. Yihi laughed and withdrew. I turned my head and looked at the statue of ice near me. A female dark elf was trapped in the ice. Hi, dark elf Sheila. Her body was cursed, so I wanted to ask Oswin and Maxim about this matter. Yihi brought Maxim and Oswin after 5 minutes. Yihi was delighted at the thought that she had fulfilled my order. I called you here to ask about this statue. A very beautiful dark elf. That symbol on her forehead, High Elf? Oswin answered first. That's right, she is Chrisley's mother. Maxim and Oswin had been living in the dungeon, so they knew who Chrisley was. She was cursed and died. I wanted to ask you about this curse. Does it feel familiar? I don't know if I should say this, but... Maxim, go ahead. It is similar to your Majesty's temperament before you lost your memory. There are also differences. That is why I can't give a definite answer. I nodded. That's right, it isn't the Shadow Emperor. Something with a similar temperament. But there is only one Shadow Emperor, and no one in the world can imitate him. I could affirm that this wasn't true. I was a being similar to the Shadow Emperor. I could imitate him. Nothingness. Oswin clapped his hands. He knew that I wasn't the real Hell Monarch. The Hell Monarch who challenged God. Those who couldn't become a god, nothingness. I also knew that Contigonam had been summoned by Okulos. Similarly, the Hell Monarch might be able to be summoned. If the real Hell Monarch returned from the nothingness, it wasn't strange that the magic power would be compared to the true demonic dragon Aogen. Maxim didn't know this, so he frowned. Your Majesty is currently here. Therefore I know that you were never dragged into nothingness. If you can define nothingness, then it is no longer nothingness. So, I wanted to ask you who knew me well. This curse, how can we remove it? I was half convinced. The Hell Monarch had been summoned from the nothingness. I'm glad he wasn't summoned to Earth, but I didn't know where he was. If the Hell Monarch returned to the demon world from nothingness, then there would be a change in the movements of the Grand Dukes. Maybe he would create an army with his power. Therefore, I had to be prepared. I needed to be able to respond to the worst situation. After a long period of thinking, Maxium responded. If your majesty truly did it, then there is no way. However, one possible method is to create a harness that will deflect the curse. Isn't that magic specific to curses? That's right, your majesty. I stared at Oswin. Can you make it? Oswin shook his head. The materials are the problem. Making a harness that can deflect the curse, no matter how good my blacksmith skills are, there is a limit. I can imagine it, but the legendary orichalcum is required. Oswin had suffered under the Hell Monarch. He was well aware of the Hell Monarch's strength and had several ideas to defend himself. As expected, it seemed like he had some plans ready. I have it. The only problem was the materials. You have orichalcum? I have enough to make a few weapons. Is it possible? I looked at Yihi, who swiftly flew away. Yihi noticed what I wanted with just one glance. She soon returned with a pile of orichalcum. Oswin's mouth widened as he saw it. Did you gather all the orichalcum in the world? I've only seen scrapings of it. Oswin, it is possible. That is plenty. I am unleashing my skills after a long time. Haha. Oswin shrugged. Do you require anything else? I need time to look at the curse before determining more materials. I will tell the fairies separately if I need anything. Isn't that right, Fairy Nim? Oswin winked at Yihi. Yihi looked at him with a haughty expression. Yihi wants a new teacup. Of course, I have to make it for you. Do you know the honey containers? I would like that. Of course, I have to make a new one. It seemed like some type of deal was completed. I wasn't too concerned about them talking in front of me. At this point, I could hand it over to them. Chrisley's turn will come later. The curse needed to be removed first before turning Sheila into an undead. If I prepared, I could survive even the worst situation. Hell Monarch. Sheila had been in this condition for a long time. I didn't know what to expect if the Hell Monarch had really come back from the nothingness. How would the movements of the Grand Dukes change in response? I watched Maxium with a firm expression. Maxium, I have something else for you to do. The next day, Maxium exited the dungeon with thousands of skeleton soldiers and the Lich. They took an inconspicuous path and crossed the Pacific Ocean. He emerged again in Chile, South America, and immediately swept everything away. For His Majesty, the dungeon creatures or humans didn't matter. He killed everything in sight and caused confusion. The number of corpses rose rapidly. South America was the same area as Grand Duke Upa's military headquarters. But they couldn't properly control Maxium's emergence. It was because most of his troops were preparing for a war against Ariel Diablo. North America, Las Vegas, United States. There was a dungeon, but it was a peaceful city due to no monster waves occurring in the last 5 years. People's daily routines didn't change much. Rather, they gathered together due to the damage other people in the world received. The people were complacent, thinking that this routine wouldn't change. The United States was called a large resort. In fact, monster waves rarely occurred from any dungeons in the United States. At least, until today. 200 Death Knights, 500 Dark Warriors, numerous ogres and Cerberus. Other advanced creatures appeared from the dungeon. And Ariel Diablo was riding the high-class ranked Dark Horse. The moment she appeared, the noisy Las Vegas became silent. I am Ariel Diablo. I will wipe out humans and destroy the earth. A dazzling beauty. She had large horns on her forehead. The overwhelming atmosphere caused some people to lose their spirit. The creatures suddenly disappeared, but her presence was truly outstanding. Ariel was a Grand Duke and demon. She didn't care about the eyes of the humans. Rather, she was sick and tired of humans. Ariel Diablo looked around and said coldly, "Kill everything." Hi-hiing Tilda. As the Dark Horse ran wild, Ariel Diablo raised her sword. Hua! Dark stems flew out from her sword and penetrated the heads of the Death Knights and Dark Warriors. It was the King's Blessing, epic skill. At the same time, the dark magic power became stronger and the Death Knights and Dark Warriors were shrouded in a black fog. The humans hadn't been completely unprepared for this situation. There was always some awakened waiting nearby. However, Ariel jumped down and struck the ground with her sword. At that moment, Kwang, a blast that stretched out a few hundred meters from Ariel occurred. The ground cracked and a huge storm occurred. The elite awakened couldn't withstand the aftermath. Many awakened died without leaving any traces of their bodies behind. In the midst of that, Ariel spoke with an expressionless look. "It is time for your end, humans. I got a clue about Sheila and Maxium was currently outside causing confusion. Therefore, it was time for me to prepare. Jives, Kerpai, the fire and water spirits. I had to check if they had escaped from the dark spirits. After I called both of their names, the contract was implemented. Small cracks formed and both of them appeared near me. Contractor, you finally called. It is great to see you again, Contractor." Jives and Kerpai simultaneously greeted me. They looked similar to humans, but were a little bit fuzzy. "Both of you are injured. Damn dark spirits, I will return this grudge 100-fold. Me too. I will make them realize how scary the water spirits are." The two antagonistic spirits had joined forces. It was all thanks to the dark spirits. At that time, the fire spirit Jives stared at me and asked, "But Contractor, I feel something very familiar from you. What on earth happened?" "I formed a contract with the Great Fire Essence." "What? A contract with one of our 9 fire essences?" "Wait, Kung Kung." Jives sniffed me before stepping back. "It is unbelievable. It is definitely a contract. It is also the highest one. What will you do?" "I promised to return it, but the fire essence has made a contract with me." I immediately cut to the chase. Jives frowned and said, "I will tell the king. I can't decide this alone. I will wait." Sweeing, Jives hurriedly left. "Contractor, have you touched our artifact?" "Don't worry." I handed the hyacinth's bow over to Kerpai, who carefully accepted it. "Thank you. The Water Spirit King will be very pleased. Oh, and, as a reward, Kerpai handed me some small stones. These are old stones from deep inside our lake. They are spirits that will soon awaken. If a contract is signed with them, they will grow rapidly according to the contractor's tendencies. They are children that the king highly prizes." I took the stones and examined them carefully. They certainly felt strange. In short, these stones were the seeds of a spirit. "Well, I have to go back quickly. The king is waiting. I will come back with good news, Contractor." Kubuk. Kerpai bowed her head and left. Jives returned as she left. Jives had a determined expression on his face. "The story is over. The king wants to see you." Fire Spirit King. I didn't know a lot about him. Except for the dark spirits, none of the others were involved with the fight between demons. Their enemies were the other spirits. Although I had heard some rumors, it wouldn't be as helpful as seeing him in person. I know Adonis tried to take over. The light and lightning spirits put up the most resistance. Adonis had broken through the limits and managed to occupy half of the spirit world through a fierce struggle. One of his enemies was the Fire Spirit King. His name, Garish. I nodded as I remembered. I couldn't help feeling a little nervous about finding out the difference between rumors and facts. The king doesn't like waiting. He might be a bit rough, but please understand. Don't worry, rough words and behavior could easily be overcome. From the beginning, I wasn't the type of demon to pay attention to the tone of my opponent. I wouldn't become aggressive just because of the tone. Contractor, we need to climb the stairs in the fire spirit world to meet the king. All outside presences have to climb these 3,600 stairs. There was nothing in the air. Then I could see countless stairs made of flames going up. Not long after passing through the crack, I arrived at the place. It seemed that climbing the 3,600 stairs was a trial. The glowing red stones kept burning. It seemed like some sort of magical measure. The Fire Spirit King would be able to climb it without any incidents. Anyway, flames like these couldn't harm me. Cheek. While climbing the stairs, I heard something frying. Indeed, if my intelligence was only 80 points, then it would have been painful. However, my intelligence had already surpassed 100. Jives was surprised that I could climb the stairs so casually. Even intermediate spirits find it hard to climb this easily. Is it due to the contract? It is easy even without a contract. The contract with the essence of fire did give me a feeling of comfort, but I could easily climb up even without the contract. Outside existences have been climbing this staircase for a long time. Other spirits also watch this place with curiosity. Why don't you shake their hands? As I climbed the stairs, I noticed numerous eyes watching me. Numerous fire spirits were solely focusing their attention on me. I had wanted to talk to him quietly, but it seemed difficult to keep this a secret. The water has already been spilled. I should cement the relationship. That's right. After helping the fire and water spirits, the water had already been spilled. My intention was to block Adonis from rising up any further. It wouldn't hurt if I could construct a relationship with the fire spirits. I shook hands with the fire spirits around me. They rose up from the ground to my level. The spirits are delighted. Contractor has an affinity to fire, so they are more enthusiastic. Is that so? It isn't needed for someone of my level, but how about contracting with a subordinate spirit? Depending on the contractor, the subordinate spirits can grow rapidly. It wouldn't be bad for the contractor. Jives suggested when we reached the halfway point. A contract with a subordinate spirit. Kerpai had also handed me some stones containing spirits. They wanted me to raise the spirits. I don't have interest in training spirits, but Jives' words were correct. It wouldn't be bad. I had stepped into the realm of transcendence, so contracting with a few spirits wouldn't matter. At best, they would only gnaw away at a little bit of my magic. Even this would be offset by the Conqueror's Ring. As the magic power recovery efficiency increased sharply, it would exceed what the spirits consumed. Let me think about it. I briefly replied. Jives smiled with satisfaction. Maybe you can mention it to the king. Ask for a spirit seed. Contractor will be able to raise a very special and wonderful fire spirit. I will raise it as a bad person. Haha, contractor, are you joking? I was serious. If the spirits grew to resemble me, then they wouldn't have a normal personality. I didn't bother saying anything. I walked up the stairs for another 30 minutes. The scene that appeared before me was quite amazing. There were many flowers made of fireballs and a few dozen Cerberus. The sun was so close that it gave off a feeling of pressure. Let's hurry. The light from the sun is very strong, so the king will be in a bad temper. Is he a person who hates waiting? Maybe. At any rate, contractor. Follow me. Jives increased his speed. The fire spirit king Garish. He looked like a sturdy man with red hair and a beard. He wore a red cape, 10 rings and expensive necklaces. However, my perspective was a little different. Most of his items are epic grade. I inwardly panicked after examining Garish with mind's eye. It was the first time I met him, but he was wearing really good items. Did he wear better items due to a prejudice against the Dark Spirit King who controlled the Demon World auction? Maybe Adonis would be perplexed by his appearance. His stats are the strongest among those I have seen. My heart jumped quickly. I thought I was the strongest after returning to the underground world. I couldn't let go of my tension. Name: Garish. Occupation: Fire Spirit King. Title: Asterisk Ruler of Flames, X Epic. All stats +4, full immunity against fire. Stats: Strength 107, +1-2, Intelligence 103, +7. Agility 104, +1-2, Stamina 104, +7. Magic Power 105, +19. Potential: 523 +57 550ths. Uniqueness: the ruler of the fire spirit world. As the strongest fire spirit king in generations, the fire spirits have tremendous trust in him. Skill: Spring Sun, Epic, Sun Shield, Epic, Majestic Fire, Epic, Photosynthesis, Epic, Hellfire, X Epic, Advent of the Sun King, X Epic. Skill and item effects: Sun Ring, Epic, Magic Power +5, Hellfire, Epic, Strength, Agility and Stamina +2, Burning Power Ring, Epic, Strength +5, Sirhan's Necklace, Epic, Intelligence +2, Agility +5, Majestic Shorin Armor, Epic, Magic Power +7, Ring of Last Breath, XU, all stats +1. Relative comparison: Garish, Strength 119, Intelligence 110, Agility 116, Stamina 111, Magic 124, Potential 523 +57 550ths. Randolph Brigzeal, Strength 105, Intelligence 105, Agility 100, Stamina 107, Magic 110, Potential 434 +93 550ths. A total of almost 600 stat points. Overwhelming was the only word to describe it. Even if Adonis managed to break through the limit, it would take a lot for him to catch up with Garish. It wouldn't be impossible, but Garish was rapidly expanding his sphere of influence. That is why he is so rushed. Adonis. He wasn't the strongest among the spirit kings. I could feel the difference after seeing Garish. In addition, the reason why the dark spirits were moving so hastily was explained. It was possible that they could pressure the dark spirits. Therefore, Adonis had to feel impatient. Seeing Garish explained everything. The sky above the sky. It was surprising that the Fire Spirit King was the strongest. I hadn't expected a presence that would surpass me. This was why I couldn't be complacent. I had to walk further along the road while holding the reins. You contracted with a great fire essence? Garish laughed with his hands clasped behind his back. That is correct, Herm. Your contract with Ifrit is relevant to us. Welcome, Chiok. Garish extended his hand. I am grateful for your welcome. From the beginning, I had thought about maintaining a favorable relationship with them. After a short handshake, Garish said, I will speak briefly. Cancel the contract. My eyebrows furrowed. It wasn't unexpected, but I never thought he would immediately ask. It seemed like he was rude and impolite, just as Jives stated. I started to talk quietly. Ifrit is located in my heart. You will have to use force if you want me to cancel the contract. If the contract was forcibly cancelled, there would be negative effects. In particular, he was located in my heart, so there was a chance he could be caught up in the aftermath and die. Garish puffed up at my words. Fire filled the spacious room. Amazing magic power. Even I felt some pressure. It had been a long time since I experienced something like this. I had hardly felt such tension since returning to the past. However, my intelligence and magic power weren't low. It was enough to strike back against Garish. Pride's flames emerged as I stepped closer to Garish. I was challenging him to try it. Anyway, he can't hurt me. This was the fire spirit world. The current location was its heart. If there was a battle with Garish, then many of the spirits I saw whilst climbing up here would be destroyed. As well as, I was a benefactor to them. Garish had to know this. In these situations, the king needed to act with dignity. Every word and action had value. He wouldn't kill me after I returned something to him. This was a type of test. It was to check if I was a worthy person to contract with Ifrit. Jack. Garish clapped his hands. At the same time, the intense aura in the room disappeared. He spoke in an admiring tone. How great! A demon who has already stepped into the transcendent realm. However, it seems like it isn't a perfect transcendence. There is a strong feeling of imbalance. Not all of my pure stats had crossed the wall. Maybe that was what he was referring to. I turned off Pride's flames. The test is over? Garish laughed. You pass. You are a worthy contractor for the Great Fire. I don't like that you are a demon. But based on what I heard, aren't you taking a different route from the other demons? He had a completely different attitude from before. I was speechless. It meant Garish acknowledged me. I touched Wrath and the Emperor's sword. Devil. My goal is to beat all the Grand Dukes and become the Devil. Devil. I like underdogs. Most of them will fail. However, the ones that succeed would change the world. At any rate, you are Ifrit's contractor. You are now a friend to the fire spirits. I would like to give you a gift. Is there anything that you want? It was a gift after the test. I felt somewhat dissatisfied, but I wasn't going to refuse. I couldn't return with empty hands after coming here. So, I told him my desire without any hesitation. I want to receive a large number of fire spirit seeds. The first time, 100,000 should be enough. Chapter 168 to 172, Spirits. 100,000. Although they were spirit seeds, that was an unreasonable number. Fairies and spirits were born a long time after being conceived. I asked for 100,000 while establishing a business relationship. However, a small number was meaningless. Contracting to the lowest level spirits wouldn't be very helpful to me. A few things were possible, but it was highly unlikely. However, I can steer them from behind. The Korean humans will act as a breakwater in the dungeon. Roy and Rose had already become the center of the Korean people. The Giran was actively supporting me so I could move them from behind. My dungeon would become safer if the Korean Awakened contracted with the spirits. They would act as a breakwater if I needed to leave again. Of course, A contract with the spirits had strict standards. They had to sincerely crave strength. Their desperation as they followed me would touch the sky. In addition, there might be achievements related to it. I had many reasons for asking Garish for the seeds. There was no reason for him to refuse. The problem was how many seeds he would allow. It was an opportunity to recognize what he was willing to distribute. I watched Garish carefully as he slowly opened his mouth. That is an unusually large number. Won't it take a lot of time to raise 100,000 seeds? Garish's point was correct, but the spirits would wake up quickly in the dungeon. I said calmly, that won't be a problem. Garish gave a small smile. Okay, I will give them to you. He surprisingly agreed. It didn't take that long. What do you want? I want information. The Dark Spirit King. No, Adonis. What is the ultimate goal of the Black Frog? The Black Frog. It clearly showed how Garish thought about Adonis. It wasn't strange, even if they were both kings. Is he asking because he really doesn't know? Apart from that, I frowned at his question. Was Garish asking because he really didn't know why the dark spirits attacked the fire and water spirits at the auction? Control of the spirit world. I threw a fastball. Garish just hummed. He shook his head and declared, it is a primary goal. I wouldn't call it the ultimate one though. I wanted him to show me the system, but he kept it a secret. Raising and lowering the rank, opening cracks, etc. The system is very unrealistic. I want to know what Adonis will ultimately do with that system. Ah, I remembered hearing something similar. After summoning the cruel Commander Maxium, the seal around Earth was shaken and the fire and water spirits noticed the system. Garish seemed to have a lot of interest in the system. The dark spirits. In particular, Adonis is trying to use the system. I hadn't thought about it. The system applied to everyone involved in the game and couldn't be owned by anyone. In my previous life, I never heard rumors about Adonis trying to use the system. But, to be honest, it didn't make sense that Adonis would try to control the entire spirit world in the first place. The spirit world was wide. The number of spirits was immeasurable and there were many types. There were at least 20 spirit kings discovered. On the other hand, Adonis was alone. Even if he used the system to break the limit, would he be able to cope with the entire spirit world alone? He had the help of the points from the demon world auction, but it was still unreasonable. Unlike the demons, the spirits didn't pay much attention to their enemies. If the contract benefited them, then the spirits would work together. So, what if he tried to truly unite them using the system? I never heard of Adonis associating with other spirits, so it was truly strange. The dark spirits are always eager to find loopholes in the system. In particular, they looked for things related to the crack. They had previously used a loophole to open a small crack to contact me. What if it was possible for them to freely open and close the crack? It would be possible to separate each element. An alliance between spirits would become impossible and they would be defeated. It wasn't impossible to open a hole in the world with a crack. In my previous life, Adonis had ruled the spirit world like Ariel Diablo ruled the demon world. I didn't know what happened after that. Maybe Adonis and the spirit world started a war with Ariel, who became the devil. Was it an assumption? Even if it wasn't the same, he would have achieved it in a similar manner. Now I realized that Adonis was acting in a more complex manner. Ruling the spirit world was just a primary goal. I suppose he wants to become an all-powerful god. God, that was it. Although I didn't know anything about gods, it wouldn't be a strange achievement for him. It was possible to become like a living god. Adonis. He had quite a strong greed. You see it as well? Garish's eyes flashed. He continued, I am ignorant about the system and the game that all of you are playing. So I had to guess what Adonis' ultimate goal was. He was now convinced. Garish's expression seemed like things had become more interesting now. As I said, I like looking at an underdog. It would be very exciting to see them show off their power while facing me. It isn't ripe yet. I will have to wait for him to break through. In other words, he was waiting for Adonis to break through the limits. I couldn't understand his way of thinking. He also isn't normal. Why would he allow an enemy to threaten him? I couldn't understand it. I would have struck the enemy before they became equal to me. Yet he was deliberately allowing Adonis to grow. No matter how I thought about it, Garish really wasn't normal. There was a moment of silence. In the end, Garish said, Randolph Briggseel, I will send the seeds through Jives. I had a good time. And it is sad news for Ifrit, but the ninth fire has entered the consciousness to make his flames stronger. He will be asleep for the next 3 years. So a great fire essence isn't complete? The ninth fire was the last to manifest. At any rate, you can ask Ifrit the rest. Ifrit was currently trapped by the heart of the Hell Monarch. I was hesitant to take him out because I didn't know what would happen. It wasn't important, so there was no need to take risks. I am expecting the 100,000 seeds. I turned around at these words. Garish stared at my back and murmured, "An interesting demon. I will watch your path." I reflected on the meeting after returning to my dungeon. I don't have a good feeling. Garish, he was strong, a strength that could match the heights of the Grand Dukes in my previous life. However, he wasn't fierce towards Adonis. In the end, Garish gave Adonis a chance to eat him. Adonis. By now, he should have broken through the limits using the essence of origin. Time was needed to break through the limit and fill up the potential. Based on Garish's attitude, he would give Adonis that time. If Adonis started a full-fledged attack, would Garish really be able to stop him? I just thought about becoming the devil. It definitely made sense. I would laugh as I became the devil. That was my dream and it hadn't changed. I had never thought about what would happen after I became the devil. It was in the distant future, so I hadn't prepared for it. But now it was different. I had time to prepare as much as possible. Adonis was likely to be a potential enemy. I already turned him against me to a certain extent through the contracts with the fire and water spirits. There is only one conclusion. My eyes shone. I gripped wrath and the Emperor's sword. I have to become stronger than I am now. The shock from encountering Garish was still fresh in my mind. I might be the strongest among the demons, but that might not always be the case. It was just like the situation with Okulos. So, I had to keep becoming stronger until there were no more enemies left. Then I would have nothing to fear from Adonis and the spirit world. Garish seemed to have acknowledged my strength. In just 3 days, he sent 100,000 seeds through gyves. Most of them were half-burnt tree branches or leaves that had a weak vitality. Contractor, don't treat these children badly. If they are raised properly and sent back to us, then you will receive a huge reward. Gyves lectured me. It was a sign of his affection for the seeds. Is it necessary to return them? The basics will be according to the contractor. However, think carefully when deciding. We have a lot of treasures. There are legendary things that the other spirit kings can't touch. Garish had been wearing remarkable items. By the way, it was a little surprising that there were legendary ranked items. He is trying to entice me. I knew the effect of legendary ranked items, so I couldn't help being attracted. Understood. Well, I have passed you the seeds, so I will go back now. I want to rest a little bit. He was tired from constantly working in the last 3 days. I nodded and Gyves returned to the spirit world. Master, what is all this? Yi was waiting for me. I replied in a calm voice. Seeds of the spirits. Ah, that is why I can feel fire magic power. Wah, it is the first time I've seen so many seeds. Yi flew around the seeds. After a while, she returned to my shoulders with an unknown smile. Yi, Master, are you going to leave all of them in the dungeon? I will make them manifest first. Then Tilda, can Yi take some? I was nervous about what Yi would do, but there were plenty of them. Take only 3, just in case. I limited the number. Yi. Then Tilda, can Yi pick the seeds? I shrugged and said, go ahead. Yi. Yi's laugh filled the dungeon. I was an amateur when it came to birthing the seeds of the spirits. They would wake up eventually, but a portion of it depended on the composition of the environment. I immediately called Chrisley. She was the only one who had information about spirits. Yi seemed like she was familiar with them, but I didn't want to ask her. It would be better to listen carefully to Chrisley. Fire spirits. This is the first time I've seen so many seeds. Chrisley's eyes were wide with surprise. Yi had a similar reaction. However, Chrisley stared straight into my eyes and said, my dungeon master, will you give birth to all of them? That's right. What's the matter? If so many spirits are born simultaneously in one place, there might not be any magic power remaining. The magic power of the dungeon is sufficient. The rating of the dungeon had risen due to the tree of origin. It could handle quite a lot of magic power consumption. But Chrisley shook her head. The total magic power might be fine, but the fire magic will evaporate greatly. If the balance goes down, then there will be many problems maintaining the dungeon. Indeed, I was convinced by that. The dungeon was made up of various types of magic power. I needed to consider all the properties of the magic power. If one of them was scarce, the balance would collapse and affect the creatures. What should I do? I asked her directly. The other person was Chrisley. Her mind was quite good, her skills reliable, and she often helped me. Right now, I didn't have any clues about the situation. Chrisley responded without hesitation. Master should stay next to the fire spirits. Originally, Master has Pride's flames, and now there's the fire essence. Both are pure fire magic power. There will be some dehydration symptoms every time a spirit is born, but you should have enough to feed them. In the end, I was the answer. I had absorbed the great fire essence. There were only 9 of them in the spirit world. In addition, I had Pride's flames, so it was appropriate for me to be their source of fire magic power. I will be by their side. Does it have to be all day long? Yes. It will take some time for the seeds to familiarize and react to you. Master will have a good influence on the spirits. Chrisley was adamant. I felt a certain amount of relaxation after hearing it. It was better than receiving a nail in the side after starting. This hadn't occurred in my previous life. I wasn't familiar with this and had to hope for the best. Although her nature wasn't significantly different from in my previous life. There was nothing else to be said. Chrisley was an outstanding dark elf, so she could easily handle things. Do you know when they will be born? However, I was busy. I couldn't only take care of the spirit seeds. Although I had the confidence that I could do well, that was something else involved. Right now I had work I needed to do. Given the maturity of the seeds and what I previously saw, I think it should take a month at most. 1 month is too long. My dungeon master, leave everything else to me. I can control Roy, Rose and Maxim to some extent. Chrisley laughed. I thought about it. 1 month. The current situation on Earth was changing every day. It might be wise to stay in the dungeon for a month. I won't be exposed and I might be able to beat a tired enemy. It was a strategy. Furthermore, I could believe in Chrisley. The spirits are worth it. 100,000 spirits. It was worth staying for a month when thinking of the benefits that would be given when they were born. In the meantime, I might be able to develop myself. Chrisley, I will leave it to you. You have to closely manage them. Maxim should be okay, but there are a lot of variables involved with Roy and Rose. In particular, Roy and Rose needed to be carefully watched. Even though Rose was smart, she was still a young dark elf. They were variables that I had no knowledge of. Right now, Korea was rapidly changing. Many people were gathering and Seoul was recovering again. Technology was replaced with those powered by the cores and a new government and country were being built. It was possible to move the humans in the desired direction with Roy and Rose. That's why I gave Roy the magic sword. I gave them instructions, but it was unlikely that the work would be completed before the spirits were born. My dungeon master, don't worry, everything will go in the direction that master wants. I will trust you. This was enough. Afterwards, Chrisley withdrew. I turned my head and glanced at the seeds. Then, the faster the spirits were born, the better it would be. I needed to put all my effort into it. I spread fire magic power around the seeds. I was dubious but would try this method first. I sat down in the center of the seeds. I slowly covered the seeds with the power of Pride's flames and the fire essence. Randolph Briggseel's fire magic power has been applied throughout the floor. The seeds of the spirits have responded. Their egos are slowly awakening. Awareness rate, 18.5%. The power of fire is too strong. 358 spirits have been destroyed without being born. The power of fire is too weak. The awareness rate has dropped. The power of fire is adequate. The awareness rate has increased significantly. Awareness rate, 19.9%. It was harder than I thought to maintain the magic power. It was important not to apply too much or too little. In particular, I frowned when the message stating that spirits had been destroyed appeared. It is hard. I would rather wield a sword wildly. It was annoying to sit still and control my magic power. It was no different from torture. The awakening rate is slow. Besides, that was another point. Chrisley had said a month, but 2 weeks had passed and the awareness rate was only approximately 20%. At this rate, it would take more than 2 months. Especially as the awareness rate decreased when the percentage rose. My concentration plunged slightly after 14 days. I realized how hard it was to steer the magic power. I have entered the realm of transcendence, but it is only halfway. Currently, I am no different from a strong child. My ability to move magic power efficiently is weak. I had to admit it. I thought I was slowly growing stronger, but I wasn't at that level yet. I needed to raise all my stats over 100. I was ignorant about how to control this strength since I had never experienced it in my previous life. Originally, I naturally controlled my magic power while fighting. But fighting isn't the only way that I can become stronger. I needed this process to realize what I am lacking. It was possible to have a breakthrough when there was enlightenment. It would have been impossible with only fighting. Enlightenment was an important part of it. I only discovered it recently. My magic power is too rough. It is like a wild horse. It only knows how to run. I thought about what I was lacking and came to this conclusion. The regulation of my magic power wasn't appropriate for the spirit seeds. If there was no roughness, then the awareness rate would go up. The seeds were eggs. They needed warm air to be hatched. Warm magic power. I needed to temper the qualities of the magic power. Controlling the properties. It didn't suit my nature. I can't give up just because it doesn't suit me. If it didn't fit, then I needed to force it. Giving up meant there would be no development. I needed to smash through this challenge to move forward. Of course it was difficult, but I would eventually get the hang of it. I thought about the time I felt warm magic power. Earth's protector Aussies. A human. She was an awakened from the United States. She knew how to move the land. At first glance, she was similar to Okulos, but their fundamental natures were different. She really disliked fighting. Whether it was plants or humans, she even trembled when seeing a demon get hurt. She couldn't help not wanting to fight. Her magic power was the warmest I'd ever felt. She thought she could redeem everyone. Eventually, she was killed by a vampire due to this, but she had many great accomplishments. Aussies had something. I wondered what it was. A presence of mind. Was it because she loved and cared for people? I laughed at the idea. Imagining myself like that caused goosebumps to form. I honestly couldn't imagine it. I shook my head. I wasn't generous like Aussies. If that was necessary, then it would be an impossible challenge. I couldn't change the way I had lived my whole life. So, I had to find my own way. Wake up. I will lead you. I stared at the seeds with a cynical expression. I needed to make my own path. The spirits would be those who followed me. This was the best I could do. Pyrom. Pyrom. At that moment, the seeds shook like wind was blowing. The fire magic power has warmed. The awareness rate has increased significantly. Awareness rate, 32.7%. The magic power of Randolph Briggseel has increased by 1. The conversion of a simple idea. However, the awareness rate increased by 10%. This is the right direction. In addition, my magic power increased by 1. It was amazing. Once magic power exceeded 90 points, it wouldn't rise easily. My pure magic power was 95 points. I felt a little bit more at ease. This direction was correct, so there was no more need to feel urgent. 1 week later, exactly 3 weeks after I started, the spirits began to wake up. Pyrom. Pyrom. The fire spirits that just woke up didn't have a concrete form. After springing from the seeds, they looked like small fireballs. Great achievement. For the first time, a demon has succeeded in creating a spirit. 300,000 PT will be paid. 900 achievement points will be added. It wasn't easy to achieve the messages. I watched as 1 or 2 spirits woke up. The born spirits flocked to me like they already knew me. They hovered around me like they were asking where they should go. The 10th, 100th, 1000th, the spirits started being born. It took 3 more days for the last seed to wake up, and I didn't budge from my position until it did. Finally, the last spirit flew around me and another achievement appeared. Congratulations! Of the 100,000 seeds, you have succeeded in giving birth to 99,318. Incredible achievement. 1,986,360 PT will be paid. 1,800 achievement points will be added. The spirit communication skill has been added. For a more detailed description of spirit communication, please check the status window. I received a new skill called spirit communication. I immediately opened the status window to check the skill. Spirit communication. Epic. Passive. The spirits will react to each other. This is a privilege only given to those who have created numerous spirits. Asterisk when the spirit evolves, compensation will be paid according to the rank. Lowest class to low. 500 PT. Low to intermediate. 5000 PT. Intermediate to advanced. 500,000 PT, 500 achievement points. Advanced to high class. Residual stat point +1. Asterisk asterisk high class to Spirit King. The skill will change to Spirit King Communication. The skill wouldn't benefit me at the moment, but my expectations were very high. It wasn't limited to me. The skill was only epic ranked, but the benefits were worth it. Of course, evolution wasn't easy. But if it occurred quickly, the approximately 100,000 spirits would be my strength. There is definitely a limit by myself. Almost 100,000 spirits had been born. The contract itself wasn't a very big burden for me. From the moment the contract was signed, the spirits would eat my magic power. However, I had a sufficient amount after stepping into the realm of transcendence. The problem was, the spirits need numerous contractors for faster growth. That was it. Spirits would evolve through many types of magic power and experience. There was a limit to what I could do alone. Special measures were needed to get them to a higher rank. I touched my jaw. A contract with the spirits. The information related to it is widely spread through all the species. However, Earth's humans are ignorant about this point. Who said an equal contract was required? Regarding contracts, there was a difference between the person who knew about it and the person who didn't. If I had to contract with someone, I could set up separate terms. Ignorant and desperate people would be forced to accept the terms. In short, I can make a double contract. I folded my arms and smiled coldly. I could make a contract where I was the Lord, and they were the wealth. Once the spirits grew, I would be able to use them completely and I would have a few more cards to use. Touching someone's contract with a spirit was forbidden in the spirit world, but Garish had given me the seeds and it could mean the difference between life and death. Besides, this dungeon wasn't the spirit world. The spirits born in my territory thought of me as their master. It was purely up to me if I wanted to return the spirits to Garish. He had no right to forcibly reclaim them. My thoughts ended here. Pyrom, Pyrom. The atmosphere relaxed and the spirits started to circulate the space. It was similar to childcare, so I had some concerns, but it will be fun to guess which spirit will evolve first. It felt like I was pushed into a corner. Every time I moved, the 100,000 spirits moved with me. The scene was like a huge fireball. The creatures that saw me shrank back with wide eyes. This is a little annoying. The third day, I couldn't help releasing a bitter sound. I hadn't expected that they would move so closely next to me. They only moved away for a few seconds. It was like they were insecure and afraid that I would disappear. The spirits were still mentally fragile and thought they would fade away if they looked away from me for a moment. I can't go outside the dungeon. I turned and stared at the spirits. They started moving more actively, like they were happy I was looking at them. It was good they were happy to see me, but I couldn't help worrying. Yeehehe. Fire 1, Fire 2 and Fire 3. Align left, align right. Yuha, your response is slow. Once again, align left, align right. Once I reached the top floor, I found Yeehe near the dungeon core. Yeehe was training the 3 spirits she chose. 2 and 3, are you doing this on purpose? Don't you see how lazy your movements are? Once again left, no, right, no, left, no, right. Yeehehehehe. The 3 fireballs followed Yeehe's instructions. It was equivalent to hard labor, but Yeehe just giggled happily. She managed to give birth to the spirits. I didn't understand, but Yeehe was more innocent than good. Her definition of evil was small and she was just concerned with playing. It was also a type of warmth. This is fun, Yeehe. The 3 brothers are following Yeehe. Now, do it faster. Start, Shuong. Yeehe flew quickly in the air. She was followed by 3 fireballs. The fire spirits were still unfamiliar with flying, but Yeehe was merciless. Duck. Yeehe hit my chest while looking at the spirits following her. Yah. Yeehe rubbed her forehead and pouted. Aish, what are you doing? Master? Yeehe blinked her large eyes. She quickly cleared her thoughts and pointed at the fireballs following her. I am training them. Training? Yeehe is teaching the children to fly tilde. This was what she meant by training. Although it was unreasonable to expect something, I turned and looked at Yihi's spirits. Their growth is very fast. They could already fly faster. Compared to the three of them, it was like my spirits were crawling. It was unexpected since Yihi birthed them in a similar time period. Yihi, do you know anything about the growth of spirits? Yihi doesn't know much. Well, the tree of origin loves spirits. He told Yihi to move them like this. Tree of origin. I couldn't communicate with the tree of origin. But it became possible for Yihi after she was promoted to an origin fairy. I needed to consider that the tree of origin had an effect on the growth of the spirits. Master, do you want to use Yihi's training? Yihi is very capable. I can train you. There is no need, I replied. Yihi was unlikely to be very helpful. Hying, say hello to Chrisley. If there is progress, then report it to me. A showdown was being built up in Seoul, Korea. When the humans came to Seoul, they divided into the group that followed Roy and Rose and the group that didn't. I couldn't leave the solution to them, so Chrisley had been dispatched. Yep, master. I moved after Yihi's reply. It was to see the tree of origin. Once again. A line left, a line right. Roll around once. Good. Yihi. The sound of Yihi's laughter rang through the dungeon. There was no malice in it, but it was like a disaster for the three spirits. The spirits moved more actively as I neared the tree of origin. The branches and roots of the tree of origin shook, embracing the spirits. It looks good. They played well. I climbed to the top of the tree of origin and watched them. Hopefully I can move further apart from them. I didn't look away from the spirits. They still didn't move far away, but it was better than usual. At that moment, the spirits moved in unison and started looking for me. -17 spirits are filled with anxiety. Please be careful. It is highly likely that a spirit without an ego properly formed will disappear from the anxiety. It isn't working. I descended the tree of origin to an uproar. Warururu. Approximately 100,000 spirits flocked at once. The small fireballs the size of a baby's fist moved in unison. However, it was a bitter sight for me. The contract hasn't been formed yet. Was it because it was shortly after they were born? Or the way they were born had an influence? It could be both. It can't be helped. This was an investment for the future. It would ease a little bit once a contract was signed and they developed ego. Right now, the spirits were too unstable without the contract. I stood still and stared at the tree of origin. Then the spirits started playing with the tree of origin. Name. Give me a name. 4 days afterwards, once the spirits had been born for exactly 1 week, 2 thin voices were heard in my head. It will appear in the future. 2 of the fireballs had formed children's faces. They were twice as big as the other spirits. There was certainly no comparison. Give me a name. I would love to have a name. The 2 fireballs spun in the air. Their attitudes seemed desperate. Does it originally take so long to give them names? I tilted my head to the side. This was the process of naming for a spirit. It took a very long time after the spirits were born to be given a name. Weird. At any rate, I needed to name them. Ray, Sarah, the spirits starting to run around while saying their names. I like it. Ray, my name is Sarah. Walk. Shortly afterwards, the 2 fireballs blazed with an intense light. Names have been given to the spirits. The lowest class, Ray, and Sarah, have risen 1 level. They are the first spirits to be given names. They will have a larger growth than the other spirits. If a contract is signed, Ray and Sarah will follow you more sincerely. 1,000 PT will be paid. After the short message, I noticed change in the 2 spirits. After a while, the 2 spirits greeted me with changed appearances. They looked like little children. Their size was still smaller than Yihi, but they definitely had egos. Ray, Sarah, let's make a contract. The only thing left was to make a contract. They immediately responded without hesitation. Okay, Sarah will do it. I will set the terms of the contract. The spirits instinctively knew about contracts. It was like learning how to walk and run. Forming a contract was natural for them. I couldn't help feeling tense. However, their response was unexpected. If it is Father's will, I'm at your disposal. I started frowning. I heard an unimaginable word. Father. The spirits didn't have any parents. The higher-ranked spirits just gave them names. The word, father, didn't fit with the nature of the spirits. If there was one reason, it might be Ifrit. He was the fire in charge of dominance. I devoured his magic power and gained his skill. I tried to restore a calm expression. It wasn't bad, but I hadn't expected it. If the spirits followed me sincerely, then my power would greatly increase. The contents of the contract could also be tailored to my taste, so it was like killing two birds with one stone. You should gain more experience with contracts. But, until you grow to a certain extent, you will need someone to light the way. Father's words are correct. I am still lacking. Please tell me. Ray and Sarah, the two spirits, laughed and emitted warm fire. I will light the way. However, there is a limit to the basic contract. I will modify the contents of the contract. I checked again just in case. Matters related to the contract needed to be confirmed several times, especially if it was a one-sided modification. It was normal to placate them. Father's words are right. Sarah thinks so as well. It seemed like not much work was needed. It wasn't just a title, but an infinite faith in me. It was a blind faith I found difficult to understand. They believed in me from the moment they were born. Was the impact of domination that big? I took a deep breath and said, "This will be the contents of the contract." I spent a while modifying the contents of the contract. A double contract. I set conditions that would establish myself as the Lord, and others as the wealth. No, I was greedy and went a little further. My commands were absolute and I could terminate the contracts with other people. Father, will you do it now? Then form a contract with Sarah? The spirits were fundamentally tied by the contract. I would now set off their fundamental instincts. Even so, there was no hesitation. It was a good idea to form a contract. So far, the spirits looked completely different from the ones that I knew. I nodded, causing Ray and Sarah to immediately pull out the seal for the contract. Small letters made of fire formed on the bodies of the spirits. The basic contract and the modifications I made were there. Randolph Briggseel, my father, will you sign a contract with Ray? Daddy, what about Sarah? Okay, it was an unfamiliar atmosphere. It was similar to the time I made the contract with Yeehee, but completely different as well. I occasionally felt it with Chrisley, but I was currently being bombarded with these feelings from the spirits. After I finished speaking, the letters on their bodies burned up. Then the tree of origin wrapped its branches around the two spirits. The low-class spirits, Ray and Sarah, have formed a contract with Randolph Briggseel. The tree of origin has blessed the two spirits. An essence of origin has been consumed in the aftermath. The low-class spirits, Ray and Sarah, have successfully evolved into intermediate spirits. Due to the blessing from the essence of origin, they have a chance to obtain a higher rank. The spirits can communicate with the contractor for growth. Conversely, if the communication is weak, then there isn't a high chance of growth. 10,000 PT will be paid. After they emerged from the branches, Ray and Sarah were approximately 1.5 times larger. Compared to their development, the other fireballs still had a long way to go. Father, please contract with the other children. Sarah is also okay with this. When I turned my head, almost 100,000 spirits were gathered around the tree of origin. They instinctively approached after feeling Ray and Sarah make the contract. It is my job to name them. It was a strange problem. Maybe that's why Yeehee named them Fire 1, Fire 2 and Fire 3. I worried over it. Anyway, the system messages stated that communication played a role in the growth of the spirits. I guessed that they might disappear without this connection. Of course, I couldn't memorize all of it, but I needed to give them names. Crazy. It didn't take long to realize that this was the wrong choice. By the time I finished all the contracts, 3 days had passed. Only 500 spirits reached low class and none were intermediate class like Ray and Sarah. I couldn't ignore the blessing from the tree of origin. They reached intermediate rank due to the essence of origin. However, that wasn't all. They also got a chance to increase their rank. In other words, they could qualify to become a spirit king eventually. I would invest 1 or 2 more essences if I could. I also have the seeds that Kirpai handed me. The water spirit Kirpai. I had forgotten about the stones that she gave me. It had been buried in my memories due to the fire spirits. The prized seeds of the water spirit king. I pulled out the stones. There were exactly 5 of them. Kirpai had mentioned the water spirit king when she handed it over to me. I hadn't heard the story of the water spirit king, but there had to be a reason for giving me the seeds. I could feel a stronger vitality compared to the fire spirits. Was it due to my bag? There is no change. Due to being in my bag, they weren't affected by the fire magic power at all. I placed the 5 stones on the ground. Father, what is this? Did I look like that father? Ray and Sarah led the rest of the spirits around me. Their natures were opposite of each other. Ray spoke carefully while Sarah reminded me of an immature child. Due to the clear difference in personality among them, the 100,000 spirits also divided into 2 groups. The phenomenon was surprising, but the competition also helped their growth. There would be some side effects from the antagonistic nature. However, I was certain that benefits would also be demonstrated. But perhaps due to the nature of fire, more spirits were gathered towards Sarah than Ray. The ratio was approximately 6 to 4. Water spirits dwell in these seeds. I glanced at both of them to check their reaction. Ray and Sarah were unusual compared to other normal spirits. Water was opposite to fire, so it was normal to hate them. The 2 of them approached the stones without hesitation. Their faces were filled with curiosity. No apparent dislike could be seen. These children will be the youngest. A younger sibling? Sarah doesn't hate that. Father, I want to see them soon. Can I help? Come quickly. Play with me. Their interest was great. The spirits were watching the stones more closely than I was. I don't have to do it alone. The fire spirits were derived from my magic power. Their magic power wasn't significantly different from mine, so there would be a good effect if they helped. Sincere devotion. Look after them well. The words were filled with sincerity. They felt weird in my mouth. I felt awkward since it was my first time saying such things. However, my message was communicated to Ray and Sarah, who nodded. Leave it to me. Sarah will do it. In this case, my thoughts were right. They started to look after the water spirit seeds with gleaming eyes. 3 days later, the stones cracked open like eggs and water spirits were born. Water spirits have been born under the care of numerous spirits. Originally they would be destroyed due to the loss of harmony, but the magic power of Randolph Briggseal has finally balanced it. The limits have increased significantly. They are fundamentally water spirits, but they contain a weak firepower. The title, Balanced Water Spirits, Epic, has been acquired. Bibu, similarly to the fire spirits, the water spirits were in the form of water droplets. They were frightened and didn't come closer. There was a strong atmosphere in the surroundings. Don't be scared. I am Ray. Sarah, you're Uni. Ray and Sarah extended their hands. After a while, the 5 droplets slowly approached and took their hands. Father, please name these children. It is bad to have no name. That's right, name. Another name. Just a few days ago, I had spent time thinking of almost 100,000 names. It was just 5 more, but I didn't want to go through the process of naming again. Water 1, Water 2, Water 3, Water 4, Water 5. Yi had given me a very helpful way of naming. Yi might be a seer. At first I had laughed, but Fire 1, Fire 2 and Fire 3 weren't disobedient. Pretty names. I won't say anything. The 2 spirits replied shortly, but I didn't care. I made a contract with the born spirits, but it was too early to release them. They needed more capabilities to adapt to the world. My influence there was necessary. The spirits were particularly sensitive to my mood. But I was always cynical, so it was difficult to change my attitude. A majority of demons had this attitude, and I had always lived my life my own way. Normally people would move to meet me. It was better than adjusting myself to match someone else. However, the spirits were very sensitive, so I needed to handle them subtly. As time went on, Ray and Sarah became increasingly difficult. It was a bad omen. Changing the way I am for others. Was that possible? If it helped, then I would become more friendly. I'd actually done it many times. However, the spirits would recognize it as acting. They would notice it was false and keep an even greater distance. I was busy thinking about this. At that moment, a few messages appeared in front of me. The origin fairy, Yi, has suffered a great blow to the soul. In the past few years, Yi has been supporting the dungeon and the tree of origin. The aftermath has caused a depletion in the soul. Be careful. The fairy is the foundation of the dungeon. So if she disappears, the dungeon won't be safe. I frowned. It was an abrupt message. It was related to Yi, so I couldn't do nothing. Yi hadn't said anything. I could somewhat tolerate it, but Yi's nature meant that she wouldn't be able to hide this. Somehow it was all over her face. In other words, it meant that Yi hadn't anticipated this would happen. Her soul is lacking. The area of the soul wasn't fully explored. Magicians, alchemists, etc., all tried. I only had a vague understanding of it. It was surprising that I hadn't noticed after entering the realm of transcendence. The soul depletion is becoming severe. 28.2% greater than 28.1%. There is no time to be playing around. I shook my head and immediately moved. Yi's location was obvious. The garden. It was a place that Yi had secretly made. It was on the very outskirts of the 32nd floor. It wasn't a burden for me, so I hadn't paid attention to the garden. In my previous life, I had gotten rid of the garden without stepping into it. It wasn't inspiring, so I never needed to enter. But it couldn't be helped now that there was a problem. On the outskirts of the 32nd floor, a small forest spread out for 100 meters. There were rare trees, grasses and flowers from Earth. Several bugs and deer caught my eye. Normally I would say, she managed to gather all this. However, my eyes were directed towards the heart of the forest. The Flower of Eternity. The item obtained from the Demon World auction was planted in the heart of the forest. Yi was collapsed next to it. 3 fireballs were flying around Yi. They were the fire spirits that Yi took. It isn't too late. Yi's appearance was blurrier than usual. It was like she was lacking in several areas. It was a sign that her physical power was lost and her presence was fading. But that would only happen if I couldn't resolve it in time. I hastily approached Yi and immediately injected magic power into her. I was the master of this dungeon and she was the fairy. If she was weakened, then she could recover through my magic power. However, there was no reaction. She seemed to come back for a moment, but soon became transparent again. Why? What should I do? I agonized over it in my head. I held Yi in one hand and headed to the top floor. She was a fairy of the dungeon core, so it could help her. No, I placed her on the dungeon core. However, the light from the core was weak. Once the light disappeared, I had a strong feeling that Yi would be gone as well. Chrysley, Julium, Oswin, and all the lich and shamans. I used the function of the core while injecting magic power into it at the same time. Come to the top floor right now. 500 talented creatures gathered. Some of them were hostile creatures who met for the first time on the top floor. Kobold priests, orc shamans, lich, goblin magicians, etc. The thing they all had in common was that they studied magic. Magic and spells, a power to make things not exist. The soul was in a similar area of study. In particular, there were very few that became experts in the area of the soul. Even if they read and studied the soul, the results were very different. Still, I summoned all of them. I had the right as the dungeon master. Do you recognize these symptoms? I lifted Yi up and asked. Yi was still breathing, but she wasn't conscious. She looked like she was just sleeping, except for the blurriness. I was ignorant about research into the soul. I hadn't studied it. I had never felt the need. I humbly admitted it and gathered all of them together. I wasn't stupid enough to hold onto my pride. I couldn't afford to lose my fairy. There would definitely be those who could read more deeply than me in this area. It would be a success if anyone recognized her symptoms. But no one opened their mouths. Is there really no one? It is fine even if it is a story. Soul, weak, weak. One of the orc shamans opened its mouth. I gave it a look that said, I know. Still, one of the 500 creatures had started speaking. The soul is weak? Is that all? Weak. I don't know. The orc shaman's answer missed the mark. I couldn't help but feel disappointed. The silence lasted for a while. No one could carelessly come forward. They all knew that my mood was bad. In case they didn't know, I decided to reveal more details. The dungeon fairy is now in a critical condition. She is fading due to her soul being weak. Are any of you aware of a method to restore the soul? I didn't care if they didn't recognize it, as long as they knew something. Yi was in this state due to soul depletion. If I could solve this, then Yi would return to normal. But the reaction was the same. Indeed, it seemed like not many magicians and shamans studied the soul. In the meantime, I had neglected to invest in the field of magic. I had thought it was better to raise their strength. However, it certainly was shocking that everyone except for one orc shaman was silent. How terrible, I bitterly muttered. I thought I could solve this, but I was stuck here. South Korea's dungeon was important. My main base was here. With my strength, it would be simple to occupy another dungeon. But it wasn't that simple. The Tree of Origin, the higher dungeon rating and other benefits from the South Korean dungeon would evaporate. The heavy atmosphere weighed down on the creature's shoulders. All of them hastily stared at the floor. The moment that I was about to turn away, Oswin came forward. Your Majesty, the soul is the final goal of the creator of a homunculus. Maybe Gaparam would have an idea. Ah, it was like that. Oswin was right. It was the job of an alchemist to create a fake soul for the homunculus. The lich who was making a homunculus would know the soul better than anyone. So why didn't he come out? Gaparam had an unsure expression on his face. He glared at Oswin. Gaparam, I can't heal a weak soul. Is there really no way? The soul that has accumulated for a long time is unique in itself. It can't be replaced or filled. It might be destroyed if forcibly refilled, or something other than the fairy will be made. I am connected to the fairy's soul. In order to make it more clear, dangerous words emerged from my mouth. The fact that a fairy was connected to a dungeon master's soul was top secret information. It meant the dungeon master could be hurt through the fairy. But now wasn't the time to think about that. Rather, it was better to explain it. Gaparam just shook his head. It is a pity, but soul exchange is impossible. There are no possibilities. If it is possible, it would be in an area completely different from established alchemy and science. It might be possible for a god? This was why he didn't want to come forward. Only negative words were heard. Gaparam actually looked sorry. I understood his mindset. The soul depletion is becoming severe. 27% greater than 26.9%. Nothing is impossible. I just haven't found it. One of the 500 minds here might come up with a way. It isn't a request but an order. All the creatures including Gaparam closed their mouths and watched me anxiously. I will give you 3 days. Find out as much as you can. If you need anything then tell me immediately. I turned around and left. Father is very sad. I want father to laugh. He isn't laughing. Sometimes good feelings emerged from him. I liked that. The spirits, in particular, the fire spirits became sulky. Is there something we can do? Father will be happy. The spirits hurriedly flew to the side of their father. They tried all sorts of charms, such as singing and body kissing, but father's feelings didn't change at all. It was similar to a feeling of grief. The spirits couldn't stand this. They became depressed. The fairy called Yihi is important to father. We need to fix the fairy to make father feel better. Her soul is weak. What is the soul? Unfortunately, not a lot of time had passed since the spirits were born. No matter how fast their growth, their knowledge was still lacking. Besides, the soul was a complex and difficult matter. In the end, Ray and Sarah, who had been listening quietly, came forward. We need to fill the empty spot left by Fairy Nim. Clean the dungeon. We need to manage the creatures. Play with the Tree of Origin. The work that the spirits could do was extremely limited. However, the almost 100,000 spirits decided that taking action was better than staying still. I was improvising while following a set criteria. I could handle most things. However, this situation wasn't expected at all. It was like a natural disaster where I couldn't do anything. The soul depletion is becoming severe. 8.2% greater than 8.1%. At this rate, wouldn't she disappear when it reached 0%? As Yihi's body faded, features of the dungeon also stopped functioning. If Yihi died, then the dungeon would shrink just like Pekin Grioli's. It is related to the soul. I didn't stay still. I searched through the normal store and the achievements store. I summoned several creatures and asked for their opinion, but there was nothing good. There didn't seem to be any items to restore the soul. Surely there must be a way? I gritted my teeth. I hadn't felt this helpless in a long time. Yihi and the dungeon. If I could save at least one of them, then I would. But I couldn't come up with anything. Just as I was frantically thinking, some lost features of the dungeon have returned. The flow of magic power is normalizing. The origin fairy, Yihi, has recovered by 0.1%. 8.1% greater than 8.2%. Chapter 173 to 174, Unique Dungeon. A sudden message. Only the last sentence caught my eyes. Some of the lost soul was restored. A few days had passed since the depleted soul incident occurred. It continued to be lost and there was no sign of recovery. What was the change? I didn't do anything. The 500 creatures had racked their brains but hadn't come up with a solution. It meant that it occurred due to an external factor. I can't tell. Something was occurring inside or outside the dungeon that I wasn't aware of. It was only 0.1%. There was no change to Yihi's condition. But it was the first time it rose. I needed to find out the reason behind this phenomenon. Julium, Oswin, Chrisley was currently outside. She was helping Roy and Rose. Among those remaining in the dungeon, these two were the most intelligent and faithful. The orc is hurt. Support the wounded. We need to manage the garden. By the way, how do we manage the garden? Akka. The fire spirits were busy. Almost 100,000 spirits moved here and there without a break. They were vigorously completing tasks in the dungeon. While the creatures were busy gaining strength, the dungeon was being neglected. Cleaning was Yihi's task, but the spirits took the initiative while she was down. The spirits managed Yihi's garden and played with the tree of origin. The born spirits moved for only one person. Father. They wanted him to be happy. He was mourning for the fairy, so they decided to fill her absent spot. There was no reason other than that. Ray and Sarah were intermediate spirits and supervised the work. Each one was weak, but the combined strength of 100,000 spirits was sufficient for the work. Then after one day, Father is a little happier. The contract had been completed, so the spirits were sensitive to changes in emotions. It wasn't a large change, but the spirits were satisfied with this. Let's work harder. We need to fill the empty spot left by Fairy Nim. Akka. The spirits became more energetic. I was surprised after receiving the report from Julium and Oswin. This seems to be due to the spirits? Fairies and spirits were similar but different. It was almost impossible for them to affect each other. But Julium and Oswin mentioned the spirits. Your Majesty, there are no other changes in the dungeon. If a change occurred, then it is due to the spirits. I also think the same. Julium supported Oswin's opinion in a polite manner. What did the spirits do to restore the soul? I couldn't help asking. The spirits didn't come near Yihi. No, they hadn't come near me lately. Heart, it might be. Heart? What did that mean? I didn't understand what they meant by heart. That alone didn't explain the current situation. Oswin noticed my feelings and answered more carefully. Your Majesty, I'm a blacksmith. Putting my soul into the sword, I made all types of weapons to express it. What is a sword or a weapon? In fact, it is nothing more than a lump of iron. However, if you work hard, then the sword will return the favor. The harder it is hit with the hammer, the more different it will look. The spirits are similar to that right now. The spirits are working hard for the fairy, and that is restoring the soul? It is similar, but the matter isn't that simple. It became more cryptic. The spirits were born by Your Majesty. I don't know why, but they blindly follow Your Majesty. Originally, spirits aren't as obsessive. They don't even use the word father for the spirit kings. I folded my arms. It was a sign for him to continue. Oswin continued talking. Maybe the spirits noticed subtle emotional changes in Your Majesty since the problem occurred to Fairy Nim. Due to the absence of Fairy Nim, they are working to fill the vacancy. It is unbelievable. If not, Fairy Nim might be recovering naturally. It is only a guess. Oswin stepped back. I turned and looked at Julium. Do you have the same opinion? Julium, the chief of the Dark Elves. He took a deep breath. The shamans have said this. If a lot of people feel a strong desire, sometimes it will become true. If the approximately 100,000 spirits move together with the same mind, can't they fill the empty spots in the soul? It wasn't just the opinion of two people. In that case, there was no reason not to believe. There were still many things that couldn't be understood about the soul. The lacking soul wasn't easy to fill up, but it might be possible. Okay, I will believe that the spirits are involved. Then what should I do? I wasn't sure. I didn't believe it, but I couldn't stay still. I would move with the assumption that this was right. Oswin laughed and said, leave it alone. Just watch them approvingly. I carefully watched the movements of the spirits. It was like Oswin said. I watched and saw a correlation with the soul. Simple effort has an effect. The depleted soul started recovering little by little. It was only 1% a day, but it was enough to feel hope. But I didn't fully understand. I tried to understand, but it was something that the 500 creatures couldn't pull off. The spirits were the only ones who had an effect. At first glance, it seemed like they were playing and didn't have a lot of influence on the dungeon. However, little by little, every small part of the dungeon was getting better. I couldn't fail to notice. The spirits tried to fix every small gap. Father is watching. I will do my best. The origin fairy, Yi, has recovered by 0.2%. 14.5% greater than 14.7%. As soon as I watched them, the spirits moved with more sincerity. Yi's soul recovery rose faster. I was certain that the spirits were involved in the soul recovery. Striving for someone. It is a difficult task. I've only been trying for myself. I kept quietly watching, but my mind was moving in complicated directions. I hadn't done that much for the spirits. Even so, they worked as hard as possible for my affection. It was different from the creatures bought from the Demon World auction and from the store. A blind faith. It was like this from the beginning. It was similar to Yi, but she was tied to me with a contract. Chrisley became my subordinate due to the ceremony. Although I had a contract with the spirits, it was just a transitional one. They couldn't change the contents of the contract if they didn't like it. It was the first time. It was the first time that someone had such blind faith in me. I had never felt this emotion in my previous life. So it was awkward. I didn't know how to react. I tried to change, but I didn't change. I frowned. I vowed to be completely different after coming back. I would accept the opinion of others and not be alone. I would go beyond the framework of a demon to become a true devil. That was what I had thought. Still, there was no change to a fundamental part inside me. It isn't easy to change my very nature. But I might be able to lower the standards a little bit. At the very least, believing in those who followed me would be a good development. I couldn't become a warm wind. However, there was the possibility of being a cool breeze. My mindset changed a little bit. There was a slight warmth in my eyes when looking at the spirits. The nature of your magic power has changed slightly. It is now pursuing a little more harmony. Intelligence and magic power has increased by 2. The limit of your potential has increased by 5. It was a type of enlightenment. It was only a little bit, but I had once again crossed the wall. The conversion of a simple idea. I just thought a little bit differently and this kind of change occurred. I am moving in the right direction. There can't only be destruction on my path. Harmony. I started laughing. It was like a dog laughing. I, who was more self-righteous and believed myself above others, was seeking harmony. But now my cold gaze would only be directed towards my enemies. I would lower my standards for those who blindly followed me. Father is in a good mood. I like it. Let's work harder. The soul depletion was recovering every day, and it was cured within a mere 10 days. Oh woo tilde I'm stiff. Ha tilde I slept well. Yi casually woke up and looked around. Huh, master? Why is Yi here? Yi fell asleep in the garden. It was strange. The spirits were hovering around Yi. The fairy woke up. So we don't have to work now? Surprise tilde. The spirits stampeded over to check the results of their hard work. What are they doing? Yi. Master. Yi is embarrassed to have so many people staring. Has anything changed? With Yi? Well, Yi stared with surprise at her body. My wings have increased. Her original 2 wings had increased to 4. This change occurred when her soul recovery rate reached 90%. What? Why have my wings grown? I am filled with strength. Yi spread her wings. At the same time, a bright light poured out from her wings. The light reached beyond the top floor and swallowed up the entire dungeon. I blinked with confusion, but then multiple messages popped up. The soul of the origin fairy has risen 1 level. The tree of origin has awakened. It will have a stronger influence on the dungeon than before. The spirits will have a faster growth rate. The dungeon's rating has been upgraded to unique. Further information can be found in domestic mode. It was obvious that Yi's power had grown. I had guessed it as soon as her number of wings increased. However, I hadn't expected that the tree of origin would awaken at the same time. In addition, the rating of the dungeon had risen. A crisis was an opportunity. This all started with the spirits. If I hadn't received the spirit seeds, then this result wouldn't have occurred. I wouldn't have been capable of solving the depleted soul on my own. The coincidences overlapped. They were layered little by little until this phenomenon was created. Kururung. Shortly after the messages surfaced. The dungeon started changing. The roots of the Tree of Origin expanded through the entire dungeon. It felt like the Tree of Origin was becoming one with the dungeon. The concentration of magic power has thickened. Not only did the dungeon's defensive power increase, my authority also rose. I knew it instinctively. I could see more details by entering domestic mode. Unique dungeon. I had never heard of a unique rated dungeon in my previous life. All the dungeons had been the same. There hadn't been much difference even when it was upgraded to a rare rating. I thought it couldn't climb higher, but it reached the unique rating. It means that epic and legend ratings are possible. I looked up as the light leaking from Yihi's body shrunk. The light faded to reveal Yihi, who had grown slightly bigger. Yihi has grown, master. From Yihi's head to her fingers on her hands, every part of her had increased by half a finger's length. Yihi laughed with joy. She was confused by the light emerging from her, but then she realized her growth. Do you know what has changed? Yihi touched her lips and thought for a while before answering my question. A little bit. Some of the origin magic has flowed into Yihi. It isn't a lot, but it is great. Yihi will be more helpful in the future. And the Tree of Origin told me. Hopefully, the first king can be created. King? I had already noticed the origin magic, but I was curious about the mention of a king. Just like the achievements, the title of first was attached to it. I was curious because it had a modifier attached to it. Yihi nodded. But a king can't just be created. Master will decide. In the demon world and heaven, it is possible to create a king from magicians, angels, demons or other creatures. Then this dungeon will change into another world. I was at a loss for words. Yihi's words to me weren't simple. It meant that the dungeon could become an independent world. It would be a solid presence like the demon world, heaven or earth. In short, I will be a god? Yihi laughed. Hey Tilda, that's not it. Master, what would a god do in a world with only one king? Of course, Dungeon Master can say, I am a god, but the creatures won't necessarily believe it. Well, you asked Yihi something like this, Tilda. Master is still lacking to become a god. You will gain the qualifications to become a god after everything has transcended. You will be called a demigod, but then achievements have to be piled up in addition to your stats. In that regards, hasn't Master gained significant achievements already? So you will qualify if you become stronger. Yihihi. She was saying that I was still too weak to qualify as a god. I was shocked but somewhat convinced by her words. There were many people stronger than me, such as the Shadow Emperor, the true demonic dragon Aogen and Garish the Fire Spirit King. In addition, there might be other stronger creatures that I didn't know about yet. They hadn't obtained the qualifications to become a god either. The Shadow Emperor had become a demigod, but eventually gambled his fate and lost. If I looked at the demon world, it was true that no one had become a god yet. However, it was an uncertain goal. My main goal was to become the devil. I aimed to rule over the demon world. There was no need to build my own world. No, my goal won't change. I swallowed my saliva. I was more obsessive than I thought. Once I made a decision, there was no special reason to stop. Anyway, the dungeon rating rose, so I was able to obtain larger benefits than I thought. How do I make a new king? That, I asked Yihi, but she didn't answer. Was there some pattern needed for the seed of a new world? Pattern. It meant the shape and framework when creating something. But I couldn't grasp it. Was there a pattern that allowed an angel, demon, human or creature to become a lord? Such things would only be known to the gods. This shall also be known naturally. There was no need to rush. It was enough to obtain a hint. I didn't know it now, but someday I would naturally encounter it. It was just like a puzzle. Yihihihi. Master, do you want Yihi to show you some magic? Is it the origin magic? Yes, Yihi will try it once. I couldn't see Yihi's status window with mind's eye. Therefore I didn't know what skill she had obtained. It was origin magic, so I needed to see if it fit the name. I should be careful, just in case. I stared as light flashed from Yihi's hands. Yap, a small ray of light shot out from Yihi's hands. Before long, the light reached the ceiling of the dungeon and the roots from the Tree of Origin started to simultaneously emerge. Did she intend to attack with roots? It was similar but different. The roots descended and intertwined to form a giant. 3 giants the size of the Hydra were formed. Hek tilde hek tilde phew, it is hard. This is it, Master. Yi has summoned Origin Giants. Name: Origin Giant. Stats: Strength 100, Intelligence 90, Agility 95, Stamina 100, Magic Power 80, Potential 465, Uniqueness: a giant temporarily created from the Tree of Origin. The strength and summoning duration will be determined by the power of the Origin Fairy. A high-class creature. The level was comparable with a 3LV creature. The roots of the Tree of Origin must be present for the magic to be possible, so it was available in the dungeon. The problem was the time it took to summon. Pant, 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 pant. Ah, I'm thirsty. No more, master. This is Yi's limit. After 1 or 2 minutes, Yi gasped for breath like a thirsty dog. 3 of them were summoned at once, so it felt overcrowded. However, it was only for a short time. The magic is similar. Yi had power, but she couldn't control it properly. Anyway, the Origin magic was quite appealing. If Yi knew how to use this power properly, then I would have a creature better than the other high-class ones. It was unreasonable for now, but the possibilities were there. Good work. Yi's body twisted aimlessly. Her reaction was worse because she hadn't heard praise for a long time. I ignored Yi and headed to the dungeon core. Domestic mode. The dungeon had been upgraded to a unique rating, so I entered domestic mode to see the changes. At the same time, numerous letters formed in front of me. I quickly noticed the changes. Dungeon rating: unique, unique. Dungeon barrier total 20 million. Dungeon's magic power status: pure. The stats of all creatures in the dungeon +2. The roots of the Tree of Origin have spread entirely through the dungeon, all floors. The breeding rate has significantly increased. It is possible to change the appearance of the dungeon. Height and width upper limit 200 kilometers. The probability of giving birth to a creature that goes beyond the limits of its species has significantly increased. Merging layers is possible. The potential limit of the Master Guardian has increased by 50. There were many things. I went through it. The durability of the barrier increased by a noticeable amount. All of the creature's stats went up. It was a total of 10 points for each creature, so this number wasn't small. In addition, some born creatures could go beyond the limits of their species. Not a king or lord, but a higher existence. Named. It meant there was a possibility of more named creatures being born. It wasn't easy to have a name without transcending. For example, the name Aogen only emerged after he transcended. Such presences were called named. It was a language used by humans in my previous life. The Master Guardian is Chrysley. In addition, Chrysley's potential had increased by 50. Her original threshold of 484 was now 534. She had the qualifications to transcend. A transcendental creature who listens to my commands. It is okay. There was still a long way to go, but my fists clenched tightly as I imagined it. I would have more power if Chrysley transcended. My expectations for Yi's magic were also very high. After summarizing it all in my head, I smiled and spoke to Yi. Yi, Kuom, Kuom, yes? Yi tried to erase her happy face as she turned to me. She was curious about what I wanted to say. I only had one thing to say. It was simple: reduce the dungeon by 2 floors. The 33 floors would be reduced by 2. I would remove the floors below the top floor for a more efficient use of the land. There were many inconveniences about it being split up. Joining them together would allow for more efficient management. In other words, the area of the 32nd floor would be beyond imagination. It might be possible to call the dungeon a small world. Chapter 175 to 176, Quickening Period. The magic circles are still intact. I took a closer look at the ability to merge floors and found that the magic circles remained intact. It was also possible to add a few magic circles. There would be no difficulty in moving around the dungeon. It is possible, Master. Yi thinks that there will be problems if the floors are suddenly reduced. I touched my jaw. Yi's words were reasonable. It would be hard for the creatures to adapt to the sudden change. But I judged that there wouldn't be any big problems. The creatures in my dungeon are strong. They are superior compared to those of other dungeons. And there is also a desire to create their own cultures. Their adaptability is very high. I didn't know if it was due to the Tree of Origin or the dungeon rating, but the creatures in my dungeon excelled in all respects. It wasn't enough to give dominance, but there was a clear difference. So, I was strongly convinced that combining the floors would stimulate development. Now was the perfect time to do it. Maxim, Roy, Rose and Chrisley were drawing attention on the outside. I could afford to give some time for the creatures to adapt. There is no development without stimulation. I nodded. The floors would be merged together. I made up my mind. Due to the chain relationship of eat or be eaten among the creatures, a transcendent creature might emerge. If successful, I would be free of almost all constraints. There would be no need to tie myself to the demon world auction. Do it. I understand, Master. Should I give a warning to the creatures to allow them to prepare? That would be good. Yee. Yes, Tilda. I didn't mind accepting Yee's suggestion. It wasn't bad to warn the creatures in order to reduce the aftermath. As Yee moved, a light powder fell from her wings. It was a phenomenon that hadn't occurred before. The powder harmonized with the light. She might be able to become a fairy queen. It was a phenomenon similar to something I read in literature about the fairy king. The place where the fairy king passed always had new life blooming. Yee hadn't reached that level, yet it didn't seem impossible that she could become a fairy queen. The fairy ruler. It had been thousands of years since a fairy ruler appeared. Fairies would be forced to accept the invitation to drink. It was to celebrate the accomplishments of the new fairy ruler. What if Yee became the fairy queen? What would the other dungeon fairies choose? Would they celebrate the birth of a new fairy ruler? There would be no need for them to maintain their contract with the demons. Of course, a few would have their souls forcibly destroyed. However, the fairies with strong hearts could maintain themselves. It depended on their attitude. Destruction of the soul. The name of the Shadow Emperor once again flashed through my head. If I hadn't known that he cursed the High Dark Elf Sheila, I would have thought he was dead. The first Easter egg where I received the heart of the Hell Monarch and the message stating he was destroyed was to blame for my lapse. However, there were no traces of him in the demon world. Maxim had admitted it. My magic power was similar to the Shadow Emperor. Furthermore, the curse was stronger than a high-class 4LV Dark Elf. She tried to fight, but there were no signs of a big resistance. The curse was strong. All the Grand Dukes were on Earth. No matter how much I thought, I couldn't come up with an explanation other than the Shadow Emperor. However, it wasn't entirely certain. There was always the possibility of a third party with a similar magic power to the Shadow Emperor. He might try to rise again as a god. It might be another trick or a third party. I shrugged. At any rate, the Shadow Emperor had prepared the underground world to become a perfect god. If he was prepared to become a god, the seeds of a new world should be somewhere. And they were highly likely to be in the treasure trove. I searched through all the items from the treasure trove in the achievements store. However, I didn't find anything similar to a seed. The name might be different. It might be connected to something else. Let's look a little further. I spent a few days looking through the achievements store. Ironically, the people who gathered in Seoul started to build their power near the dungeon. There were some people who expressed concerns, but no monster wave had occurred since the invasion of creatures and demons from overseas. In addition, the cores that replaced oil and electricity could only be obtained from the dungeon. It was the most suitable place for a base, unless a monster wave occurred. The Seoul metropolitan government started to become active again. Damn, where did they go when we are this busy? Kim Yong-woo. He was the guild master of Heaven's Will. At some point, Yoo Eun-hai and Edward had disappeared. The two main people of the guild had disappeared, so it was difficult to maintain the guild's operations. In particular, the two of them had disappeared at a crucial moment. Kim Yong-woo sighed as he cleaned up a pile of paperwork. Rattle. At that moment, Lee Ji-hai entered. Guild master, are you going to work? Instead of robes, she was wearing comfortable clothes and holding a shovel. Dust covered her face so she looked like a laborer. At the same time, Kim Yong-woo's expression stiffened. Hey, I am the guild master. Do I have to go to that place? Why do I have to handle it? It is because you are the guild master that you have to go. Lead by example. The population is increasing every day and it is hard to build shacks. Do you think it is a good idea to show the discipline of our guild? Don't keep running your mouth. Ayo Tilda, are there no available personnel from your guards? The chances of terrorism will increase as more people flow in. The old government agencies. The restoration of Seoul was divided into two groups. Those who followed the Giran and waited for a wise king to appear. Or those who wanted to revive the government with a president like in the past. The controversy raged on. In the end, the latter group did a demonstration of force first. They didn't hesitate to use terrorism and randomly attacked Seoul. There will be trouble if this continues. Lee Ji-hai whined. Kim Yong-woo nodded. There are too many irreversible mistakes. We have to be prepared. The country has become a mess. There were many opportunities. The invasion was abrupt, but there wouldn't have been so many casualties if they calmly gathered their strength and prepared. Their fear and frustration had caused them to be crushed. After that, people would abandon others to save their own lives. He didn't want to be disappointed anymore by repeating past mistakes. Lee Ji-hai laughed. In the end, we need the king. I have reached that conclusion. I hope they will appear quickly. The advent of the wise king to end the aggression. All of the awakened gathered in Seoul had this desire. The king, it would be nice if they came from our guild. You sound like a snob. Who cares where they come from? All they need to do is appear. It would be preferable. Are there any bad people in our guild? A representative. Rather than somewhere else, I would prefer they appear from our guild so that I know they will do a good job. I will support them from behind. I will push you. Yes, push me. By the way, do you have any news about Yoon-hai and Edward? They left a letter and disappeared, so how should I know? They'll be back. It feels strange. Is Guild Master worried? You don't have to worry about those children. Lee Ji-hai didn't seem concerned at all. She had a firm belief that they would come back. Kim Yong-woo licked his lips and said, Era, let's go back to work. Is this the time to chat? You are one to talk. Hey, you? The two of them were very friendly after going through life and death situations together. Although both had personalities that the other one disliked, they ended up matching. Kim Yong-woo clicked his tongue and changed into his work clothes. And just as he picked up a shovel, Kung, Kuong, the earth shook roughly. An earthquake? Kim Yong-woo quickly approached Lee Ji-hai. Kurururing. The shaking of the ground became even more intense. Damn, what is going on? Oh my god, what is it? Dungeon? Lee Ji-hai was looking at one spot. Kim Yong-woo followed Lee Ji-hai's gaze. He spoke with difficulty. The dungeon, it is changing? The dungeon changed its appearance. The dungeon on Bukon Mountain had now changed into a huge castle. At a glance, there seemed to be no end to how huge it was. It stretched out for dozens of kilometers. The height, it was unimaginable. It reached high into the sky. The dungeon exploration will be prohibited until a clear cause is determined. The Giran declared. She climbed on top of a podium and had a distinctive magical atmosphere around her. There is only a small stockpile of cores. We will stop all dungeon exploration for 3 days. Kim Yong-woo disagreed. The Giran and a few awakened were gathered. Only the masters of the huge guilds were present. There were 7 guild master, the Giran and 2 dark elves in a small hall. They were gathered in one place to discuss measures. Many awakened feel insecure about exploring the dungeon. If they explode, then the damage will be great. The Dambi Guild Master Alan. The atmosphere reversed as she talked. But the Giran was firm. Roy, who was holding a sword next to her, said, I can solve the problem of the dungeon cores. Do you mean that the cores can be obtained without exploration? Roy nodded at Kim Yong-woo's question. My master sent me a lot of cores. Savior, he sent me a weapon. In order to clean up those who are causing trouble. Jack, Roy clapped. Then a figure dropped down from the ceiling. It fell. Hup. The guild masters were surprised because they hadn't noticed its existence. Its height came up to their shoulders at most. The figure was a naked male with no hair. The eyes were completely black and the tongue hanging out was weirdly long. Homunculus. This was a failure, but it will be enough to clean them up. Homunculus. Artificial life. The 7 guild masters here didn't know anything about it. They just felt an instinctive fear. Being a guild master didn't necessarily meant they were the strongest. Even within the guilds, there were many members stronger than the guild master. But the guild masters had selected and raised them. They had also experienced the dungeon exploration. It was natural that they could measure the strength of their opponent. The strongest people were the man called Savior and the Giran, however the homunculus was next. The artificial golem used by the dark elf Rose was strong, but it didn't give off a sense of pressure. The homunculus groaned and gazed at the guild masters. He came closer and licked their cheeks with his long tongue. Gulp. The people swallowed their saliva. Some raised a hand to their swords. Roy noticed and said, "This child has no eyesight. Instead, he has a great sense of smell and touch. Right now, he is recognizing those who are friendly. Don't worry, that is why he is licking our cheeks." Kim Yong-woo closed his eyes. He was relatively confident, but when the homunculus tongue had licked his cheeks, he had thought, this is the end. Yes, have some guards assigned to this child. Put together a party of reliable awakened and allow him to recognize them. Master said he is somewhat violent, so he might attack allies if measures aren't taken. Shouldn't Roy Nim be with him? Roy shook his head. I will be planting the seeds, along with Rose and doing the ceremony. I won't be available. The seeds? Kim Yong-woo blinked as Roy pulled out 2 seeds. The seeds didn't look typical and had contrasting colors of blue and red. The trees of life and death. They are derived from the tree of origin. They will be a big help to us if we grow them properly. However, the creatures might move while we are planting the trees. Roy's words were solemn. His haughty composure was completely different from his previous cowardly self. However, Roy seemed a little nervous when talking this time. The guild masters couldn't understand the atmosphere. Alan of the Dambi Guild asked on their behalf, "Is a monster wave going to happen? My master has dealt with many of the creatures in South Korea. There is a possibility that the creatures nearby will come. There were many stray creatures without a master wandering. They used their instincts and attacked the people in Korea. While the trees of life and death were growing, they would release a fatal smell to specific creatures. They would instinctively come to the trees to destroy them before that could happen." Alan asked calmly, "Then why we should take the risk? They are vulnerable when growing, but they will crush the creatures after they are grown. Then do we have to plant them now? It isn't too late after everything is stabilized. No, now is the perfect time. If we don't plant them in the next 3 days, then we will have to wait 12 years. Roy looked up at the ceiling. He seemed to be looking at something beyond the ceiling. Alan looked at the other 6 guild masters. She was asking what their opinions were. Everybody was dubious but thought it was worth trying the gamble. Alan spoke once again after receiving their feedback. As soon as possible, clean everything up. The former government forces, the ones who committed terrorism. The war with them had to be finished as soon as possible. The duration was 3 days. It was best if they finished it during that time. They couldn't receive the attacks of the creatures and the government forces at the same time. The key was the homunculus. Right now, the government soldiers didn't have that much strength. The ratio was 6.5, 3.5, but they used guerrilla tactics to be annoying. It was at that time. Roy and Rose's eyes widened. They stared at a shadow and started to talk. Then the ceremony? That's right. Roy isn't reliable. The 2 of us doing the ceremony. Rose's ears pricked up. It seemed like she was listening to something. The guild masters were puzzled. Can you do it? Or rather, you don't have to do this. For now, just give me your advice. Well, we can do it. No, Rose would be better. Queen Nim can be at ease. Queen Nim? That meant it was the savior. In addition, both of the dark elves followed the presence. 10 seconds. It became silent. Roy and Rose bowed. Understood. I will try it. Shortly after the 2 opinions were unified, somebody appeared from the shadows. The outline gradually became clear. The guild masters felt their breaths being blocked as they confirmed its appearance. The person was a woman wearing a robe made of a silken material. Her skin and ears showed that she was a dark elf like Roy and Rose. Her face was veiled except for her eyes, but she gave off an overwhelming presence. There was an untouchable atmosphere around her. Despite only her eyes being visible, they could tell she was a beauty. The men had to suppress the urge to stretch out their hands. They wanted to tear off the cloth covering her face. Nice to meet you. Ah, Kim Yong-woo and the other male guildmasters exclaimed. All the women except for Alan were also amazed. Her voice was also charming. The female dark elf continued speaking. This mission, I will come along. The time limit was 3 days. It was honestly tight. They had to catch the scattered enemies. No matter how powerful she was, there was a limit to their speed. They thought like that. That was common sense. But that common sense was smashed. The plate was overturned. The homunculus was excellent for finding the enemies. His sense of smell and touch precisely spotted their hiding places, even if a stealth skill was used. Was that all? In terms of speed, he was unmatched by anyone else. A truly invincible speed. His destructive power was weaker than his speed, but it was still an insurmountable wall compared to humans. However, not everything could be solved with strength. The Giran said that she wouldn't fight humans, but Rose's golem was also very strong. The problem was the number of enemies. They were weak, but there were hundreds of thousands of them. In fact, Rose's golem had ran alone into a trap by the government forces and been damaged by 2,000 skills. Several conditions needed to be overlapped, but they couldn't be ignored. However, there wasn't one strong being, but two. One of them was so strong they couldn't be compared to anyone else. The story was different. Pesach, Pook, the female dark elf. She moved forward despite the numbers. In the middle of the enemy. She read all the traps the enemy set, grasped the enemy's movements and quickly killed them. Dazzling movements. Restrained but neat actions. No wasted movements could be found. Eek. Screams could be heard from the other side. The third day, they succeeded in attacking the headquarters of the government troops. Of course, the Dark Elf and Homunculus weren't the only ones involved in the war. Thousands of Awakened surrounded the headquarters that was in the mountains. All 7 guild masters and their members were present. Don't let them get away. We have the goddess of victory with us. The morale of their allies had sharply increased. In contrast, the morale of the enemy was extremely low. There hadn't been a clear winner in the war against the two sides. However, the situation was reversed after the two strong presences joined. In particular, the female dark elf called the Goddess of Victory played a huge part. The momentum was fully on their side, so the results seemed predetermined. The Trees of Life and Death. They were an accidental product of the Tree of Origins upgrade. Yi hadn't reported it to me, but the fire spirits found them because of the color. Fire 1, Fire 2 and Fire 3 were tired of Yi's tyranny and told Ray and Sarah. In the end, Yi was forced to hand the 2 seeds over to me. No matter how much her rating increased, Yi was still Yi. It didn't seem like she would ever change. Either way, it will be difficult to plant them in the dungeon. The Trees of Life and Death attracted creatures while growing. It maximized their aggressive tendencies. They would move instinctively and ignore my commands. Therefore, the dungeon was unsuitable for planting the seeds. It is ideal for promoting the growth of humans. I sat in front of the dungeon core. There were conditions to grow both trees. The Tree of Life grew every time there was a birth near it, and the Tree of Death grew when there was death nearby. And when both trees grew, they would awaken the surrounding species. For example, in the case of humans, there would be a higher percentage of awakened appearing. What if this was applied to the creatures? It was possible, but humans are different from creatures. The creatures weren't significantly better than the awakened. In contrast, humans had huge possibilities. This difference was large. In addition, there was a high probability that the dungeon would be a mess if 2 trees were growing inside it. It would be better to assign the trees to promote human growth. There will be many benefits if there is a high ratio of awakened. First of all, there was a need for the humans in South Korea to grow quickly. Quickening period. The time for change. I could deal with one faction, but there was a limit if another one joined. Humans would become helpful at that time. They should be helpful. That's why I was making this move. Humans, do not disappoint me. Chapter 177 to 178. Those who protect. There had been 4 demons who came to South Korea. They were part of Pandemonium's faction and brought a large number of creatures to occupy the dungeon. Pandemonium's active help meant that a considerable number of creatures entered the country. They ranged from the lowest grade to high-class creatures. People thought that there were over 100,000 creatures. The majority of them were wiped out by the man who the humans called Savior, but there were still thousands of creatures. They were scattered in various hiding spots and were steadily hunted. The hunts had been easy so far. However, if all the scattered creatures were drawn to one place by the Trees of Life and Death, it wouldn't be an easy fight. Fortunately, the government forces had been handled so they could solely concentrate on the creatures. The center of the city. The seeds were planted in the middle of a stadium approximately 110 meters wide. The Trees of Life and Death. Roy and Rose were in charge of the ceremony. During this ceremony, no one else could enter. The exceptions were the Giran and Chrisley. Did your master command you to plant this? The seeds had germinated immediately after being planted. The Giran looked at them with a surprised expression. Although she was a mythical creature, the Giran was wise and deep like it was famous for. She perceived an intense feeling from the two seeds. The veiled Chrisley spoke to the Giran. Giran, we have to hold the ceremony. Help the humans. The creatures haven't appeared yet. Rather, there is a strange feeling. The trees of life and death. The trees have contrasting energies but are strangely harmonious. As the Giran approached, the germinated seeds moved like they were responding. The Giran's eyes shone. They are reacting to me. I don't know what your ritual is, but I should be able to help with the growth of these trees. Are you going to leave the humans unattended? No, the humans are strong enough. The united humans are powerful. They aren't weak enough to be defeated by the incoming creatures. Chrisley stared at the Giran's unexpected reaction. She had heard stories about the Giran's birth through Roy and Rose, so she roughly knew how hard the Giran worked for the humans of South Korea. Now the Giran's attitude was different from what she heard. The Giran laughed as she saw Chrisley's expression. I am not a babysitter for the humans. I will help them, but they have to be self-reliant. Of course, I can't ignore the desire of the humans who gave birth to me. So, I will stay until the king appears and stabilizes the country. After that, I would like to explore this world a bit more. She wasn't obsessed. She would do her work and then leave. Unlike her appearance, it hadn't even been 1 year since she was born. She was curious about this world. The desire of the humans had played an important role when she was born. An explorer, Chrisley opposed the Giran's idea. What about returning to Master? Technically speaking, Master is the one who created you. I am not bound anywhere. Although I appreciate it, we are separate existences. I would give my help one day if he needed it. However, your master is strong enough not to need my help. I'd rather see more of this beautiful world. The Giran's beautiful red hair blazed as she expressed her will. The Giran's ego was strong. She had a tendency to tell the truth and liked exploring. Chrisley intuitively sensed this and changed the subject. Stay silent while the ceremony is occurring. A quiet and serious atmosphere was required for the ceremony. The humans didn't stay still. They hastily prepared for the invasion of the creatures. Block all the small roads. Lure them to the big ones. We have exceeded the capacity of the central shelter. There are too many people. Among them, Kim Yong-woo directed the strategy. Traps were installed and they even made paths for the creatures. But they couldn't prepare everything. Kim Yong-woo frowned. It won't end in 1 or 2 days. It would be bad if there was no place to stay. We can't leave room for the creatures to enter. It was expected to be a long war. South Korea wouldn't be stabilized until all the creatures were wiped out. However, they needed to account for the civilians. Safe places were designed to accommodate them, but there wasn't enough room. There were too many civilians in the city. Kim Yong-woo sighed and exclaimed. It doesn't need to be inside the building. Make a space anywhere, whether it is with tents or wooden planks. Anyway, we won't allow the creatures to reach the center of the city. The outskirts were completely blocked. Not one creature would be allowed inside. Kim Yong-woo's will spread to the other awakened. Kung. And at that moment, Kung, Kung. The sound of huge bodies moving could be heard. The seeds had already been planted for a while. Quarurung. An installed trap exploded with a loud noise. However, it didn't diminish the number of incoming ogres. Damn, it has started. Prepare to fight. Kim Yong-woo bit his lip. 5 ogres, 2 giant worms, 37 trolls, 1 Doulahan, vampires and ghouls. There were 300 intermediate creatures and more than 900 low-grade ones. The attacks continued over 3 days. Fortunately, the fights only took place on the large roads due to the small ones being blocked. At least there were no innocent people to be sacrificed. There were 4 barriers in every direction around the center of Seoul. It was fortunate, however, the creatures were relentless. As time passed, the damage to the awakened grew bigger. There is no time to rest. Damby's guild master Alan muttered with a gloomy expression. Hundreds of orcs were gathered on the other side of the road, with some orc lords among them. It wasn't difficult to cope with the orcs due to their previous experience, but it was the 3rd day without sleep. Some of the awakened had trouble just standing. It seems like it. Kim Yong-woo also sighed. 4 big roads. Among them, Kim Yong-woo and Alan were assigned to the west. Has there been any radio contact from the other side? Not yet. Then be prepared. Don't let even one escape. Alan pulled out a bow. She was one of the strongest archers. The arrows she shot never missed. They were always fatal. Kim Yong-woo's stats were lacking in comparison. However, a guild master required unique leadership abilities. Piok. Alan fired the bow. 3 arrows flew at the same time and penetrated the heads of 3 approaching orcs. Gruruk. The orcs became berserk and rushed forward. They didn't care about the death of their colleagues. A simple dash that didn't hesitate in the face of death. At that time, Kim Yong-woo received some radio contact. A lich has appeared in the east. We are engaging. I'm asking for help. The north is fighting a large number of Spartwa, Kuik. The south, hundreds of Nagas. Li Ji-hai heard the radio and grabbed his staff firmly. Guild Master, it is strange. After the past 3 days, I think that there is someone commanding the creatures from behind. There were simultaneous attacks that didn't allow the awakened time to rest, making them exhausted. It was impossible if the creatures were randomly moving. Someone had to be planning a strategy and moving the creatures from behind. Damn. Kim Yong-woo grinded his teeth and pulled out his sword. The orcs had already come close. They didn't have time to help the others. They needed to take care of these creatures as quickly as possible in order to join the others. Pant, pant, pant. Kim Yong-woo took a deep breath as he cut the neck of the remaining orc. In the beginning, there had been 500 awakened and this number was reduced by a third. Kim Yong-woo looked around and immediately pulled out the radio. This is the west. Kim Yong-woo from Heaven's Will. Please respond. This is the south. We are still engaged with the Nagas. This is the east. The lich is approaching. The north. Answer me. The north. There was no response from the north who were fighting against the Spartwa. Alan approached while Kim Yong-woo was frowning. What happened? The north side might have been breached. We have to go straight there. This is the center. I am Oriental's guild master, Kim Woo-ram. A large number of Spartwa, Death Knights and Twin-Head Ogres are coming from the north. We are requesting help. As soon as he spoke, a scary message was heard from the radio. Kim Yong-woo formed tight fists. The number of awakened placed in the center was the smallest. The plan was to intercept all the creatures on the outskirts. At best, there were only 200 people. However, 200 awakened wouldn't be able to deal with the creatures heard on the radio. Damn. Kim Yong-woo ignored his nausea and quickly moved his guild members. The citizens were shaking in fear. The people hiding in buildings could hear the sound of creatures approaching from the north. Kwang, kwang. Soon there was a battle. The explosions and screams made it seem like the world was ending. Oh, Lord. People closed their eyes and prayed to God. But that hope was like torture. The explosions and screams of the awakened gradually diminished. In other words, it meant that defeat was coming. The civilians would just be weak victims to the creatures. Hundreds of thousands of humans would die before help arrived. They would be slaughtered by the creatures. The young children, elderly people and everyone else. The anxiety of the citizens soared. Walk. At that moment, the outside was gloomy. Then a bright light appeared from the sky. A door opened in the sky and 2 humans descended to the ground. Heaven's Will and the Danby Guild who protected the west arrived in the center. They heard the sound of explosions from afar, but it was quiet when they approached. Was it finished? If so, it was likely to have ended badly. The 200 awakened wouldn't have been able to stop all the creatures. Are we too late? Damn. Speed up a little more. We have to save at least one more person. Kim Yong-woo bit his lip. Originally he had a lot of self-interest, but that had changed over the past few years. He sincerely hoped for the safety of the people and moved quickly. Kim Yong-woo and the other guild members were speechless as they reached the center. First of all, the corpses of the creatures were strewn around. There were also dead awakened, but the number of creature corpses was overwhelmingly higher. He had no idea what had happened. He thought they had been too late. Normally, the creatures wouldn't have been able to be stopped. He had hope, but the reality wasn't that simple. I am Kim Yong-woo from Heaven's Will. The center, please answer me. He tried the radio but it was quiet. Alan stared at the wounds on the corpses of the creatures. Most of the creatures were killed by two people. Who? The stab wounds were divided into two major types. This meant that two people had dealt with the creatures. Kim Yong-woo opened his mouth. The place where people are gathered isn't far from here. We will know when we get there. They headed deeper towards the place where civilians were gathered. A heavy atmosphere. Kim Yong-woo and Alan moved quickly. There were less corpses as they neared the shelter containing the civilians. It seemed some of the creatures had been cut down while fleeing. Creatures running away? That wasn't impossible. Creatures had instincts and would withdraw if they felt like they were going to die. But that was only low-grade creatures. Intermediate and above creatures wouldn't retreat. That would only occur if a huge difference in strength was displayed. For example, the Savior. At first, they mistook him as prey, but eventually they ran away. Still, a large number of creatures was killed by him and people called him the Savior. And there were intermediate class creatures among the corpses. There were occasionally some advanced creatures. Was there someone this strong among the humans? It wasn't the Savior. His fights were straightforward and concise. There was tremendous violence, but it was also cool. On the other hand, these two people didn't show signs of that. It seemed like there was a slight struggle. Even so, it was clear that they had great power. Kim Yong-woo entered the shelter. Soon he could see people gathered together. Guild Master. At the center were two familiar people. Yoo Eun-hai and Edward. Yoo Eun-hai saw Kim Yong-woo and gave an awkward laugh. The two of them had left a letter stating, "We're going to Tron," and then returned roughly 2 weeks later. It is fortunate that you have returned now. Kim Yong-woo sighed and relaxed. The safety of the citizens was a big problem, so the burden on his shoulders was very heavy. Fortunately, the two of them could stop the creatures without much damage. Many people were wondering about their emergence, but Kim Yong-woo dragged them into a corner. "By the way, where have you been?" "I told you, training." "Has it really only been 2 weeks since I left the letter?" The weary-looking Yoo Eun-hai said. Kim Yong-woo frowned and nodded. "Only 2 weeks? Look out there. It has been extremely hard in the meantime." They had barely slept in the past 3 days. At night, they couldn't sleep at all. Edward wasn't very helpful, but Yoo Eun-hai was different. He was tired and in pain, but Yoo Eun-hai showed no signs of reflection. She spoke with an embarrassed voice. "Our concept of time is very different. Nuna, we have become stronger. Don't be sad." Edward's appearance was unchanged, but he seemed more mentally mature. Edward patted Yoo Eun-hai's shoulder in order to console her. In order to check that it wasn't a dream, Kim Yong-woo asked again. "What is going on? Where did you go?" "We went to a training room. The man that people call Savior, he wanted us to become stronger." "What?" he exclaimed loudly. Based on Edward's silence, it didn't seem to be a lie. Yoo Eun-hai's following words were more shocking. "I can't believe it, but we were training there for over 1,000 days. We couldn't get out until we cleared the room. I was desperate." 1,000 days? That is, doesn't it explain why Edward and I can deal with so many creatures? Kim Yong-woo closed his eyes. He couldn't keep up with the story. However, the situation backed up Yoo Eun-hai's story. Even if the two of them were strong, there were limits. Now they had broken past the limits due to the training room. People won't believe that, so we'll need to rework the story. Everyone in South Korea would be focused on the two of them. Yoo Eun-hai asked with a puzzled expression. "Can't we just say it?" "Well, a story that doesn't make sense will become complicated when it involves the Savior. It needs to be spiced up a little bit. It also has to be simple. Damn. A spotlight will be shown on you after receiving the Savior's recognition." "I hate that." Kim Yong-woo didn't like the Savior. Yoo Eun-hai didn't argue about this. Everyone's beliefs were different. "Well, you seem to be able to take care of things. Can I take a little break? I want to sleep for a long time." "Yes, I will rest today and get to work tomorrow." Edward interrupted. "Please give me a bed beside Nuna." "Are you crazy? You are a man and a woman. You will each have a separate room. Even if there is no room, I will make it." Duck. Kim Yong-woo turned around. He had roughly heard the situation and now he needed to adapt it. Then Kim Yong-woo halted and said to Yoo Eun-hai, "But what is your age now? Are you older than me?" "Shut up." 7 days afterwards, the creature's attacks stopped. The people cheered. Heaven's Will had made the largest contribution and their names were widely proclaimed. In particular, Yoon Hai and Edward became major stars. Although they weren't widely known, they were like celebrities in South Korea. The strongest among the awakened. Both of them hunted advanced creatures alone, so the awakened followed them. Everyone was relieved and started using their strength to rebuild. However, to their despair, a massive airstrike occurred. Duke Martin, I muttered quietly as I looked inside the crystal ball. I watched the blood and screaming from the massive air raid. I heard reports from Roy, Rose and Chrisley and launched an investigation. As a result, I was able to confirm that someone was behind the creatures. Duke Martin, I was familiar with him. Pandemonium, he is persistent until the end. He was one of the demons under Pandemonium. Pandemonium had probably intervened. Martin wouldn't have moved to South Korea without his permission. Why was he attacking South Korea instead of my dungeon? The trees of life and death. It was unlikely that he hadn't noticed. However, he had already prepared the systematic attacks in advance. Revenge? The Giran and South Korean awakened had raided Pandemonium's empty dungeons. Pandemonium would have been outraged. Among the Grand Dukes, Pandemonium especially despised humans. It was enough for him to think about retaliation. However, he knew that my dungeon was here. Of course, he didn't know that I had a relationship with the humans. My decision here was important. It was a good excuse to get rid of a demon. A pretext to eliminate him. However, humans wouldn't be able to stop Duke Martin. Yoon Hai and Edward had satisfactory growth, but a Duke was a different story. It isn't an all-out attack yet. He is sending out feelers. I touched my jaw while staring in the crystal ball. The awakened were stopping the attacks of the creatures. It was a state of continual fighting. It is possible that it is just simple payback. However, he doesn't seem to be just attacking. Perhaps he is looking for something. If it was retaliation, then he would strike all at once. After determining the power of the humans, he would strike like a storm. That was Pandemonium's nature. It meant there were other reasons. The trees of life and death. The timing wasn't right. I need to look for it. I was very curious about the reason. I couldn't guess, so I had to determine it directly. Yeehee. Prepare the Griffin, Gigantes and the Hydra. I will be going out. Yeehee. Master. Can Yeehee go as well? You? My eyes narrowed. It was a well-established fact that the dungeon fairy couldn't leave the dungeon. I had never heard anything that contradicted this opinion. Yeehee saw my expression and explained. I couldn't originally do this, but now I can. Yeehee wants to see the outside of the dungeon. I only thought about it for a moment. What would the consequences be if Yeehee went outside? You shouldn't do anything other than what I tell you to. Yeehee. Absolutely. I will listen to Master's words. Listen? Although I was somewhat dubious, she was firm. Her eyes were burning with the will to go outside. Anyway, I needed someone to move the high-class creatures. Be prepared. Yes, Yeehee. Yeehee danced with glee. Chapter 179 to 180. Saintus. The Griffin, Gigantes, the Hydra, and Yeehee. The number was small, but exceptional existences emerged from the dungeon. In particular, the Hydra was beyond imagination and its body could be seen from a very far distance. Except for Yeehee, the combination was something that I couldn't hide. Immediately after exiting the dungeon, there was a huge sound. The Hydra left huge marks behind it as it destroyed the terrain while the Griffin flew in the sky. Kung, Kuong. I wandered around Seoul after coming out. There were 3 high-class creatures, so the humans couldn't approach at all. Guild Master, what should I do? I am ready for battle. Yoon Hai muttered in a small voice. Yoon Hai, Edward and elite members of Heaven's Will were chasing after the high-class creatures. The role given to them was to observe without going closer. Fortunately, the creatures were only moving within Seoul without acting, but they didn't know when that would change. How terrible. However, Kim Yong-woo didn't answer. Kim Yong-woo could feel a little bit of the strength of the 3 creatures. It was especially strong from the huge creature with 9 heads. Without even looking at it, an instinctive warning rang in his head to avoid it as much as possible. A monster wave? No matter how strong Yoon Hai was, she couldn't hunt a high-class monster. It was to the extent that she would only be able to buy time. Kim Yong-woo shook his head. That's not it. It seems to be related to the change in the dungeon. It was difficult to know what was going on. He couldn't guess what the three creatures had gathered together to do. So they needed to keep as far away from the three creatures as possible. In the meantime, the high-class creatures faced a group of orcs that hadn't evacuated yet. Kwang, Kururung. The first one that moved was Gigantes. On top of that, the griffin used a breath attack from above. Dozens of orcs couldn't react and were melted. The Hydra didn't attack, however, it was absolutely stronger than the griffin and Gigantes. Just seeing it was enough to cause a tremor to run through his body. It wasn't only Kim Yong-woo. The elites could only watch the slaughter with fear. Crazy? There was no need to look twice. Kim Yong-woo's mouth moved before he thought about it. Tell the other teams, absolutely never touch that group. Yeehehe tilde. Yeehe was excited. This was the first time she had left the dungeon and experienced Earth. This was a new and thrilling experience for Yeehe. She always felt joy when exploring unknown things. Now everything seemed lovely in Yeehe's eyes. She sat on one of the Hydra's heads and looked down at the ground. It would be great if Yeehe could build a garden in this place. What do you think? Below her were the corpses of the orcs, but Yeehe didn't care at all. She saw corpses every day. Little fairy, be in trouble. From Master. Gigantes vehemently opposed the idea. He had a great deal of experience with Yeehe's playfulness. Do you think Yeehe is going to do something bad? Yes, please. No. Yeehe will only do good deeds in the future. The garden. Well tilde, that's right. What, you don't know? Yeehehehe. Are you a big fool? Yeehe knows many things tilde. Yeehe was irritating Gigantes. In fact, Yeehe didn't even know what she was saying. She just thought that Gigantes' reaction was funny. Little fairy. Trouble. Yeehe didn't listen at all. She showed a willingness to establish a base here. Yeehe's eyes flashed and she grabbed a few seeds. Soon afterwards, she sneakily hid it from Gigantes' eyes and scattered the seeds on the ground. Yeehehehe. I watched the movement of the creatures from afar. Duke Martin. Will he be watching? Or, the creatures had been moving for 3 days. They seemed to be wandering aimlessly, but every action was being observed by Martin. Where are you hiding? There certainly must be a goal. Show your movements. I searched for the location where Martin might be hiding. On the surface, I seemed to be cleaning up the creatures around my dungeon, but my purpose was Martin's death. Martin can see a set future. He is the most difficult to kill of Pandemonium's demons. I must use this opportunity to kill him. The ability to see the future was a cheat, but it was far from universal. There were many restrictions and the future was uncertain. But when it came to his life, he became aware of situations where he could become a ghost. In my previous life, he was one of the demons who survived until the end. Martin attacked Soul using the creatures but disappeared as soon as the high-class ones left the dungeon. However, he wouldn't have retreated. He was hiding somewhere and watching for an opportunity. The problem was determining Martin's goal. I was waiting for his next move because I couldn't guess. A few days had passed. I discovered a group of goblins carrying something. They were moving a few human females. I immediately noticed that the females were awakened. What are they trying to do by catching awakened? My eyes narrowed. It was true that the Korean awakened had remarkable growth compared to the awakened of other countries, but there was no reason to capture them. If he wanted points, it was better just to wipe them out. Awakening wasn't hereditary, so there was no need to kidnap them. They were also only women. If it was simple lust, there was no reason to only choose the awakened. There is something. I had an intense hunch. I slowly and quietly followed the goblins. I needed to act cautiously to stay below Martin's radar. A cave inside the mountains. A lich examined the women captured by the goblins. Tisk. The tanned skin means that I can't easily determine their age. The lich's gleaming eyes seemed to penetrate through the women. A total of 8 women were trembling with fright as they avoided its eyes. They wanted to live, but when they examined the surroundings, their mouths naturally stayed closed. There were dozens, perhaps hundreds of naked women all over the place. They were all pale, like the blood had been drained from them when they died. There were some who weren't dead, but trapped in a cage. And some were being used as the playthings of the creatures. It was clear that they would soon die. Please spare me. The women burst into tears. They didn't want to die. Even if they were awakened, they all cared about preserving their lives. The lich said cynically, Kolkal, don't worry. If you are suitable, then you will receive more hospitality than anyone else. I just need to verify it first. You should answer honestly. Humans in their 20s, raise your hands. 6 people raised their hands. The Lich nodded. The goblins brought the proper ones this time. The Lich reached out to the 2 women who didn't raise their hands. Quack. They were beheaded. It happened in the blink of an eye. The women stiffened. They couldn't scream. Their mental strength was stronger due to the increased intelligence, but that was useless in the face of death. Every woman had a limit. There is no need for those not in their 20s. Now, the rest are in their 20s, correct? It was silent. The Lich didn't like it and moved his fingers. No answer. Tisk tisk. That's right. 23. The surviving 6 women responded. The Lich took the next step. It took out a small water bottle that contained a white mucus. From now on, I will feed you this potion. If you are suitable, there will be a sign on your body. If not, you will end up like those women over there. He pointed to the women who were the playthings of the creatures. Their flesh was cut with a knife while their mouths were forced to do shameful things to the orcs. Little by little, the women who couldn't scream anymore were killed. They thought this place was hell. The ones who reached their limits were killed by the creatures. Drink. The Lich forced the bottle into the mouth of a woman. The woman resisted as much as possible, but the Lich forced it into her mouth. Cough, cough. As soon as she drank it, the woman's body started twisting in strange directions. She collapsed on the ground and her mouth became slack after 30 seconds. It seems like you aren't suitable. Well, there are still 5 women left, so it isn't hopeless. What should we be suitable for? A woman who was watching barely managed to open her mouth. The Lich paused for a moment and replied. Duke Martin can see the future. He predicted that a saintess would be born on this narrow landmass. I am trying to figure out if you are the saintess. Has that answered your question? Saintess? Kulkulkul. It seems unlikely that a powerful saintess would be born on this earth, but Martin Nim's prophecies are never wrong. The Lich once again grabbed a potion. The women bit their lips with a gloomy expression. Saintess. I see. I was hiding in the darkness and listening to the Lich's story. I was wondering why they were attacking the humans so intensely, but now I had a clear reason. Saintess. The holy woman. The complete opposite to the demons. Naturally, she would be a challenge. The saintess used powerful holy magic like the angels. A person like that was going to appear in South Korea. But the timing was strange. Was it because of the trees of life and death? If so, there was a high possibility that the saintess hadn't appeared yet. Martin might be acting independently of Pandemonium. Although it was limited, Martin could see the future and was acting to remove her beforehand. It was impossible to see far into the future, but he could avoid my pursuit right now. He is unaware that I am chasing him. If he knew, then he would have stopped all activities. That didn't mean there weren't suspicions. Certainly, Martin's ability was limited. He just detected danger. I worried about it for a short moment. I was standing at a crossroad of whether to grab the Lich or to leave. I need to find his goal first. The potion could recognize the saintess, but I couldn't predict when Martin would move his base. If I continued my chase, then it would be an uphill fight. Rather, it was better if he came to where I was. This isn't the main base. I need to monitor the bases and identify their movements. I will catch Martin after the saintess is found. I shook my head and left. In my previous life, there were many human awakened called saintesses. They manifested in unspecified conditions, and there were even instances of it occurring before the person awakened. In short, I didn't know where she would pop up. The saintesses were just as strong as the awakened. The saintess used her holy powers to drive out the demons and creatures, so many humans followed her. Of course, there were questions. The saintess used holy power, so wasn't she related to angels? Actually, the angels who descended to earth made alliances with the saintesses, so it was reasonable to think so. However, the demons came to a different conclusion. Believing was different from following God. The saintesses were from earth while heaven was an entirely different place. But no one knew if God had intervened or not. It was just a guess, but someone that existed since the beginning of earth used their hands to make the saintesses. I know something that the demons aren't aware of. Late in the evening, I sat on the tallest building in Seoul and looked down. It was certain that a saintess would be born somewhere where many humans were gathered. I touched my jaw. All of Earth's gods are sealed in dungeons. Maybe the destruction of a dungeon and the appearance of a saintess is related. A saintess was a woman called by a god. There were no gods on Earth due to them being sealed in the dungeons. Certainly, even in my previous life, the saintesses appeared after the dungeon was destroyed. I might have hastened the emergence of the saintesses. Of course, there were certainly more specific conditions. I was just to blame for the time difference. And there were signs that a saintess was a weapon, or a holy person. Martin is planning to use the saintess for something. At first, I thought he was moving under Pandemonium's orders. But based on this, Martin seemed to be moving on his own. I found out he was aiming for a saintess, but I didn't know what he wanted to do with her. Was he planning to make her his doll? Forest. A forest appeared in the north. What does that mean? A forest? A place in the middle of nowhere became a forest. There was a sudden disturbance among the humans. The humans were shouting and making a fuss. I turned my confused eyes towards the north. Soon I was able to see a huge forest. What? I couldn't help but feel curious. The trees of life and death were still growing. They didn't have the power to create a forest. I never ordered it, which meant it was created by an external influence. What do we do? Should we report it? If it is true, I think we should scout separately. Watch out. There are bees everywhere. There are also king bees flying around. The number isn't a joke. I nodded after hearing their words. If there were bees in the forest, then I could easily guess the culprit. Yi had an obsession with gardens and bees. There was a 99.9% probability that Yi was the culprit. The question was how she created a forest outside the dungeon. Is it possible to set a terrain outside the dungeon now? This part wasn't clear. It wasn't as large as the one around the world tree, but I hadn't expected that. Yes, I should use this as a sign. An idea suddenly emerged. Yi's actions could be poisonous, but they were also beneficial. It was just a forest, but I decided to use it as a sign. It would be an abrupt event for Martin. Martin wouldn't be able to read Yi's improvised actions. So, what if there was a good weapon in this sudden forest? Perhaps Martin would think there was a unique weapon in the forest. There were many vague points about the abilities of humans. Martin would immediately dispatch some creatures to monitor the forest. Perhaps I might be able to discover Martin's position. I'll handle it as quietly as possible. I smiled with satisfaction. The Awakened started exploring the forest in teams of 12. Their mission was to determine if the forest was a risk or not. It feels cold, Edward muttered. Despite it being a bright afternoon, it was dark inside the forest. The trees were high and thick, so little light came in. Damn, why did this forest suddenly rise up? Kim Yong-woo spat out with a tired expression. A series of unimaginable things occurred to the world in quick succession, so Kim Yong-woo's face was filled with suffering and exhaustion. He kept on having to adapt to hellish things, so Kim Yong-woo wanted to rest for a little bit now. That is why we have to investigate. Guild Master, do you think we are here for a picnic? Lee Ji-hai pouted. She didn't know Kim Yong-woo's itinerary, but it was his fate as a guild master. That isn't comforting. Please let this be a quiet incident. I'm sick of fighting. Would guild masters of other guilds be talking like this? Knock it off. You don't know what I've had to do. Kim Yong-woo bitterly muttered. It made a lot of sense. Heaven's will was stronger than other guilds, and thanks to that, the guild members were able to mature. He had to take care of all their affairs. The guild masters of the other guilds gathered around him, but he didn't know if he liked this or not. Guild Master, are you sulking? What? We didn't come here to play. Quietly search the parameter. Still, the guild master wasn't entirely aware of it yet. Yu Un-hai laughed at Kim Yong-woo and Lee Ji-hai. You two look good together. Don't they? Edward agreed with Yu Un-hai. What is wrong with you? Stop saying such terrible things. Un-hai, do you want me to sew your mouth shut? There was an immediate reaction. Kim Yong-woo and Lee Ji-hai glared angrily at the two of them. Yu Un-hai avoided their gazes and muttered in a small voice. Really go well together. They ignored her mumbling and the exploration resumed. It had already been more than an hour, but they didn't find anything. At best, they spotted a king bee and a flock of honeybees. Half of their tension was released. There were no apparent threats. Rather, it was more like the humans were a threat to this ecosystem. After another 30 minutes, stop. Yu Un-hai stopped the party. Those behind her became nervous. What's going on? Kim Yong-woo carefully asked Yoon-hai. There is something in front of us. It feels very dangerous. They haven't noticed us yet. We have the advantage, Edward added. Surung. The atmosphere became tense as they took out their weapons. It felt dangerous, but they would fight. After he entered the training room, Edward was able to become a strong warrior. It would be better if Edward and I go check it out. The rest of you should wait here. Don't forget to tell the other teams on the radio. Yoon-hai lowered her body. There was a risk when investigating the forest. Moving like this would allow them to make more accurate judgments. Understood. Kim Yong-woo bit his lip. The other awakened were strong, but Edward and Yoon-hai were unique among them. It was the right choice to support them from behind. Soon Yoon-hai and Edward hid their bodies. They used rapid movements and instantly disappeared from sight. What the? Kim Yong-woo sighed and took out his radio. He wanted people to avoid provoking this area. 3 minutes later. It wasn't a long time. Kwang. Kim Yong-woo and his group heard the sound of explosions. Kwarurung. The ground shook and the trees swayed. Did they fail? He really didn't want to fight. But it now seemed to be a combat situation. Prepare to fight. Yoon-hai and Edward, join us. The 10 remaining members, including Kim Yong-woo, swallowed their saliva. There was a vibrating wavelength of magic power. The awakened absolutely couldn't miss it. The newly emerged enemy was strong. But even so, they couldn't leave Yoon-hai and Edward. The 10 awakened started to move quickly. However, they had to stop after walking a few steps. Avoid it, Suok. Kwang. A spear of light shot past Kim Yong-woo's cheek. It hit the ground, causing a huge explosion and spreading bright light everywhere. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, he saw Yoon-hai and Edward running. Following them were a number of angels. One of them gave off a really unusual feeling. A little baby angel. The angel had 4 enormous wings and was being carefully held in the arms of another angel. Angels? Why are the angels? Don't just stand there. Yoon-hai ran past while Kim Yong-woo was mumbling. Guild Master, you understood, I understand. Kim Yong-woo turned around after Lee Ji-hai cried out to him. Retreat, run at full speed.